One. So yeah, guys. So like I was telling you before, when I was very, very starting up in IT hobby, and this was the time of what, it was the time of the 48K modems, right? And so here I am on my computer at night, just working out, and I find this BBS. I connect to it, right? And I find all these games to play. And I was like, fantastic, playing all these games for free, right? And I started playing, and I remember I started playing some chess game and stuff like that. And I spent like, I don't know, maybe the full night playing it, and I stopped playing, and all of a sudden, next day I get a call, and I was like, what? A call, right? And I connect, and it's just basically, I start hearing, do you want to play a game? And I was like, what's going on, right? And all of a sudden, I get these people coming into my door, right? They're knocking on my door, and they go like, what are you doing? And I was like, what am I doing? Nothing, I was using my computer, right? And it turns out that I was in big, big problems because I probably joined the server that I shouldn't have joined, and yeah, and that was a bit complicated for me at the time. I spent actually very, very hard time trying to just explain them that I didn't want to do anything, and I just found this server on the internet, and I kept on having these calls, and eventually, I get a call from them asking me to go into a certain office, and they take me there, and turns out that there was this mega computer that wanted to destroy the world.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
Wow.
sounds like
That's some stuff, man.
quite a
that was
journey.
well. I don't want to. I don't want to do it again. But when you're young and you do these stupid mistakes, I think that's probably what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we often, when we're young, find ourselves in situations where we're confronted by entities that are trying to take over the world, and
Yeah. You never know.
it's really jarring, right? I mean, it changes your perspective forever.
Correct. You never
Yeah,
know, man.
yeah. It's something you just have to live with in the end as well. It's always there. You never leave that behind. It's always there with you. It's
It has been,
yeah, one of them
it
things.
has been scarred in myself that I could have ended the world.
Nobody knows what's
It's
happening. Everyone is so
scary.
confused right now.
I guess
Dopamine.
I'm.
Fusion is the best for these streams.
Dopamine says
I
I'm
guess.
confused. Arcana says
I,
what? Yeah, no,
It's that long since I've done one of these that everyone's really confused as to what's happening now.
just watch that in the plot of Westworld. Ah, I'm sorry. Sorry, Streaking
oh
Bison. Westworld is not the answer we're looking for today.
nope,
It's no,
not
no,
Westworld.
no.
But
No,
feel free to keep guessing there. Welcome to the pre-show,
it's
everyone.
it's an older one. Let's just say that it's an older one than Westworld. Come on, guys.
Is it older than Westworld's based on a book, right? Is it older than the Westworld book? I'm pretty sure Westworld's based on a novel, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's. To be honest, I'm not sure.
Nobody's gonna
But
get
okay,
this.
Oh no, it's based on a. Oh no, it's based on an older film. So the film that Westworld is based on is older than the film that you're talking about. But I
okay,
think that
okay. So that makes
I
sense.
think
But
that
no, yeah. Okay, let's
yeah,
let's just do it this way. Do you want to play a game? I don't know if anyone is familiar with that one, but
like I would get that straight away, but I don't know if anyone else
yeah.
would.
Do- Dopamine says, I have only had half a mojito tonight. I didn't know it was this effective. Now we're just confusing everyone. Don't think too much into this, guys. Don't worry. Don't worry. Everything's gonna be okay. Probably.
James guesses the Forbin project. James, you're thinking too obscure. You need something a little bit more
Oh, there we
mainstream.
go.
He got
He's
it.
got it.
There
He's
we
got it.
go.
He's got it. Yeah.
He's got it. He's got it. Yes. Yes.
Fantastic. Do
Oh,
you,
no, dopamine is not
Let's play a
from
game.
Saw, man. It's not from Saw.
I think he
No.
does say it in Saw, but it was originally from
well, yeah, Saw's a lot
originally
newer.
from War Games. Yeah, yeah.
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 Yeah. War Games for sure. What a great movie, right?
It is a great movie. I'd love to see a remake of that. Actually,
With today's technology, it could work with an AI or
yeah.
something like that someone just connects to. That
It,
could work, right?
it could. It'd be really good to bring back Matthew Broderick, but not as his hacker teenager alias, but actually bring him back as like one of the government officials or something like that.
Yes, of today, yeah, could be, yeah.
Yeah.
James
I think
says,
the
I didn't know
original was
you were
set
in
in
War Games.
Seattle as well, if I remember rightly.
The beer podcast.
He lived through it, James. He lived through it. He lived through it. But I think it was set in Seattle as well, Brian, if I remember right. I have to go back and watch the film, but I'm pretty sure it was set in Seattle.
It could be. I haven't seen it. As you all know, I'm terrible when it comes to movies, so this stuff usually goes over my head.
No, it's I can't remember how young I was when I watched it, but yeah, it's an oldie one. I don't know if it. I actually haven't seen it since. I don't know if it aged well. To be honest, there's all these movies that don't age well. I don't know.
Probably not seen it since the mid 90s, but I think it came out in the
Yeah,
early 80s. What was it, 83, 84, something like that when War Games came out? I know it's
yeah,
older than me, is the film, so it must be early 80s.
Everyone's commenting on the
Jesus,
beards now.
see,
Beardcast.
older than Jay, 84. Jesus, man, I'm gonna hide now. I'm just gonna hide because I'm just
Okay.
Jesus.
We need a beard rating, guys. One, two, three. Brian's one, Burgon's two, I'm three. Rate
Nah,
beards, guys, in chat. Who gets
Oh,
who gets one, two, or
I
three?
I think we already know who has the best beard here.
I think we
Um,
know. Yeah.
I don't think this
Jay.
is really a question.
No, come on, Jesus Christ. I
Oh
didn't know
my
there
god.
was a competition of beards because otherwise I would
Well,
have waited another year to join the podcast
that's
so
the
that we
thing,
would
right?
do.
Nobody ever thinks that Top Clack is a competition of beards, but alas, it's
Correct.
it's
It
it's
is.
almost
It is.
exclusively about beards these days.
Indeed,
I,
indeed.
yeah, I feel inferior when I see your beard, Vogon.
Yeah, I
Um,
didn't even know what he looked like. I didn't even think about what he looked like actually until he joined about an hour ago in the call, and I was like, oh wow,
I
I was
like
not
to.
expecting this.
I used to like to keep my. Well, obviously, a lot of people in UK have seen me before, but yeah, I was talking to Brian about that. The voice difference between the voice and seeing the person. It also
yeah.
changes. Yeah.
I feel like
See, I
you're
think I met you in real life before I heard your voice. Actually, I think seeing you in real life was the first time I heard your voice. I have
Yeah,
a
for
feeling.
sure, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Karcha. Thank you so much for
Graham
that tier one.
Karcher, thank you much. Yeah. 23 months. Wow. Thank you. 23 months. How many top pack babies is that, Brian?
Oh, I'm not gonna math. I'm not doing this. We're not playing this game
No
today.
math. No math.
It's
Yeah, I
10
don't.
with three on the way.
Oh, I hear the Vesta in the background. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. You
assuming
can
that's what
hear
it
it
was.
going now. Yeah, it is. It's going now. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
have do you have the orders coming in through that too, or just
Yeah,
Twitch?
so it displays orders on the site. It also, if people tweet me at jprototypist, it will display that message on the board as well. And it
Cool.
also does a few other things. It like lets me know if the doors are it's connected to the alarm system here in the workshop. So if the front door opens or someone opens the window, it pings a message up there and lets me know just because
That's
I
cool.
can.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does a few other bits as well. It gives me a quote of the day in the morning. Gives me the weather update at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. so I know what it's going to be like during the day. Um, yeah, it does a few things. It's good fun.
Nice, nice,
Nice,
nice.
nice, nice. Well, all right, guys. I think it's probably around the time we can officially start the show. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm gonna roll an intro while you drink some coffee, Jay. Oh man, I've been drinking a lot of coffee lately. I used to not be a coffee person, and now I feel like I am absolutely a coffee. I have to have it every day now. It's kind of a problem, and I wonder
Welcome
if
to the
Yeah.
welcome to the coffee edition.
the
That's
older I
yes.
get, the more I want coffee every day of my life now, and that's a little
Do,
worrying
do,
to
do,
me.
you want to
But
know, do you want to know a fun story, Virgo? And chat as well, I guess. So when I went to stay with Brian a couple of years ago in the summer before we
oh
went to
god,
the Seattle meetup,
this is a good
um,
story.
Brian's a late sleeper and I'm an early riser, and we both knew this going into it. Like I knew I was going to be up before him, and he knew I was going to be up before him. So I asked him if there was a local coffee place. He said, "Oh yeah, just borrow the car." He left the car keys out for me. He said, "Just go out for a coffee if you want." So I figured the next morning, right, I'll go out for a coffee. I know he's not going to be up for a few hours. I'll go out for a coffee. Go down the main road, 5-10 minutes away. There's a coffee shop, so I go in. Um, Only it's an exotic coffee shop. What was it called, Brian? Can you remember the name of it? I've forgotten the
Um,
name, but it was an
sheesh.
exotic coffee
I
shop
should know the name of
where
it. It's
let's just say the outfits were incredible of the waiting staff were incredibly uh, they might not meet Twitch's terms of service. Let's put it that
They
way.
would absolutely not meet Twitch's terms of service. So it's like I'm trying to think of like a good term for it. It's not like a nude coffee shop, but it's like as close to nude as you can get without being nude. So the baristas
Jesus.
will
Yeah.
wear like like little, what are they called, pasties, like little tiny covers for their nipples, and that's like about it.
Yeah, it
So
was very interesting, especially at like 9 o'clock on a morning. This was like I was jet lagged at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I walked into a
So
coffee shop, and
here's
I thought I
What's
was
the, what the
hallucinating.
where am I?
So
Yeah.
weird.
yes, we have a few of those out here. But the fun thing about those is generally when you have a place like that, the quality of their coffee is not very good at all, because the
No,
whole premise of the business is to get
Correct.
people in
I
to
don't think
buy
that they're there for the coffee. People are
buy
not
higher
so
really there
here's
end.
for the
here's
coffee.
the interesting thing: the coffee was not good, but I really enjoyed drinking it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally forgot that happened, but yeah, that's like a pretty
Yeah,
normal thing out here. I've actually never been to it, which is kind of
How
funny.
about you?
You've been to that one, which is right by my house, and I've still never been there.
Yeah,
Which one is your
yeah.
favorite? I wouldn't go there because I don't really see the reason. If I'm
Was
going
it
out
was
for
it
a
called fantasy
coffee, like
coffee or something?
I want something nice, you know.
Was it called
It's
fantasy coffee or something like that? Fantasy
yeah, I think it
or
had fantasy in the name.
yeah.
What's funny is there's so many like actually genuinely awesome coffee places, in sub 10 minutes away from me, and that's the one place where you ended up. Which
Of
it's
all the
of
places,
all the
exactly.
places you could have ended up, you ended up at
But
the one place
Jay,
that's going to serve
Jay,
Yeah.
you worse coffee
let's
than
let's just
Starbucks.
put it let's just put it this way. Jay didn't get there by chance. Let's
Oh,
just
he
say,
got there. He just got to a different there, if you know what I'm
you know,
saying.
Yeah.
yeah.
I hope your wife's not
That terms
watching.
of service funny. She probably
Oh my gosh. Anyways, in the interest of keyboards, which I sort of still think this show is sometimes about occasionally, we're gonna talk about some keyboard stuff today, guys. Of course, I'm Quakeums. That's Jay over there, and if you haven't noticed, the positively sexy and sensual man in the middle,
Jesus,
Vogon
man.
PT.
He
You
wants to put
just
me right.
I
He
was
wants to
trying to
put
think of
me.
how I can describe you, and it's just between the voice and you kind of got the salt and pepper look going on. You're very clean on your hygiene, and I didn't think you were gonna look this good. So but first of all, welcome to the show, but also just thank you very much for bringing up the sex appeal of Top Clack.
no, my
Finally
beard
past
just feels
one.
Thank you, guys.
scraggly.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. No, really appreciate that.
I
Thank you so
feel
much
like
for
I
having me.
should have brushed and straightened my beard now. I feel
I
like I
feel like
should
I
have
should have done anything after looking at Vogon. I feel
No, to
like
be
I've
honest,
been boring.
no, I just want to say thank you so much. Honestly, thank you so much, guys, for having me. I really appreciate you guys having me. It's a really honor
it's
to be here. Right?
it's fantastic to have you.
Only time,
Obviously,
man.
some people in chat know that Jay and I have both on separate occasions been on your podcast, The Thok,
Yeah.
which everyone should go listen to if they haven't already. It's a fantastic show, and you go over some awesome things with some awesome guests. And now it's obviously our time to return the favor. So. Thank you for joining us, and we do have a topic on the dock today for you guys. So we're going to be talking about customs. So if anyone tuned into last week's episode, you know that we sort of started to talk about this amidst another topic that we were talking about, and we had decided that there's probably enough content here to kind of warrant its own little episode. And we sort of jokingly roped Vogon in from the chat last week, and now here we are. This joke has become a reality, and now we are going to be talking about what is and what is not a custom, what makes a custom, and the kind of etymology of customs, and all the opinions that we have surrounding it. So it should be a pretty good show. Obviously, chat, if you guys feel like you want to discuss and chat with us, please do. We highly encourage it. We try to be a lot more interactive with the chat these days. So if you have some thoughts and opinions you'd like to share, or you just want to be part of the discussion, please, please, please do not hesitate. Feel free. And we can try to interact that way as well. But why don't we just kind of get started here? So let's talk a little bit about the background of it, the etymology, if you will, of the word custom, and what exactly does it mean, Vogon? What do you think?
That's a funny thing, right? So custom in Portuguese, or at least in Portuguese, we have a lot of customs. One of the customs that we have is actually basically, as an example, on midnight we eat 12, how do you call it? The peas, which are not peas, but the grapes that are the dry, right?
Raisins.
We eat raisins.
Raisins.
So
Yeah.
we eat 12 of them, right? On top of a chair. You climb on a chair. You eat 12 before the midnight. You have to eat 12. Then you go under the table. You scream, and then you drink champagne. That's how you should spend your midnight.
Wait,
That's
wait, wait.
basically what I tell
Every
some. So
midnight?
no, on midnight on 31st to first
Oh, okay.
of
New Year's
December,
Eve. Yeah.
on New Year's Eve. That's what you do. So that's a custom that we have. Customs. We have a lot of customs. We have that. We also have customs where we do codfish with cream, stuff like that. So, that's for us what custom means. All right?
Hue says, that's just my Saturday nights. He also subs for 20 months. Thank you so much, Hue. Oh my
Months.
gosh.
Wow. What a legend. Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah, that sounds like a very interesting custom.
Yeah.
In the sense of keyboards, though, gentlemen,
Oh,
what do we kind of think about this? Because there's obviously some dictionary definitions. What do you think about these, Jay?
Yeah, and I think if you look to the dictionary, and I know we've got it on our doc here, but the traditional dictionary definition of custom as a word, as a noun, which is kind of where the
So,
conversation might be going, is it's a traditional and widely accepted way of behaving or doing something that is specifically to a particular society, place, or time, which is what Vogan was referring to.
yeah.
It's a specific um, uh, custom that he has in his home country. In terms of actual, the hobby and the way we use the word custom, I think the majority of the show will be around discussing around how that really works today. But if you actually get a literal definition of the word custom, and I've just realised I've deleted the tab that had it on. Um,
do you need some help, Jay?
it's kind of, yeah, I've lost where it was
So
on the tab. I've lost my tabs now.
that's quite all right. So basically, in the keyboard community, we say custom a lot, right? It has to be one of the most widely used words in our hobby, I would think. But I feel like we rarely ever
Yeah.
think about it before we actually say it. However, there are obviously there are noun definitions, there are adjective definitions. How we say custom, and we say it as a noun a lot of the time. Oh, I got my new custom. But in reality, we're actually using it as an adjective, and we're shortening it because it's supposed to be, custom keyboard or custom made keyboard. Custom is describing the keyboard, but we like to say custom as, a noun, an actual thing. This keyboard is a custom, for example. With that said, there's obviously a little confusion, but like Jay mentioned, we'll probably be focusing more a little bit on the more adjective, kind of descriptor, as it were, to describe your keyboard and what is and what is not custom about it per se. So that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on a little bit today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best place to start with this is the history of what it's meant across the hobby as well. So if you go right back to the beginnings of this hobby, and we talked about custom, a custom keyboard generally meant of one of few things. It would be something like taking an existing retail custom, an OEM board, and customizing it. So it's taking that word custom and changing it into customized, which would mean you might put some aftermarket keycaps on, you might spray paint the case, you might customize it in any number of ways, and then it would become a custom keyboard. And I think that was the origin of the word custom in the hobby, way back when, before we started to delve into the whole designing and manufacturing of keyboards. So you had things like hand wire builds that were very custom in terms of their layout, people making just a plate file and getting some switches and hand wiring the board in a certain layout that they were looking forward to. You had people making Soras converters and things like that to get old vintage boards customized into the modern world and working with USB ports and things like that. So there was a lot of, especially if you go back on the history of Reddit, back to Ripster days, if you remember those days. Some of you won't, but probably best not to Google Ripster. You'll find a lot of the old custom keyboards were things that like OEM boards that were then customized to make something that was more useful for that particular person. I'm sure, Brian, you've had some boards over the time that you've customized yourself and you would have called custom back in those times as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great time to bring this up because Hue in chat says, is it a stretch to say things like modded Philcos are custom? So taking an OEM board, making your own, your own modifications, does it then become a custom? Well, that's something I hope all of us will be able to answer by the end of today's show, and hopefully you will be as well. So we'll kind of get to that as well. but yeah, what do you feel about that, Vogon? Do you have any thoughts on this before we kind of move on
So,
to maybe
so
describing what some of these could
I,
be?
I, I think that Jay and Huey made a point, right? Which is, I think that first of all, my point of view on this is that the etymology, the word itself, the custom, can be attributed to a lot of different things. But I find that as an example, in my personal opinion, you getting a Philco, and changing the switches and changing the caps and painting it and stuff like that, that would make it a custom keyboard because it all depends. You customize it, and then it's the thing that we need to talk about, which is like we spoke. It's the etymology of the word itself. What are we talking about when we speak about custom? There's so many different definitions of custom. Could it be that it's just custom in terms of layout? That you just customize the layout that you want, and you want that that alpha to display a different key. That's also a customization, like Jay was saying about source converters, etc., like that. Making sure that an old board like an IBM that was made on to work on PS2 and sometimes even on console to work with a modern computer. That's also customizing a board that wasn't doing. But I think you know I think that there's a lot of definitions that you can go through, but I think that customizing, as in taking a OEM board like a Philco, like a Magic Force, like something like that, painting it, changing the look, I think we could categorize that as a custom keyboard and not just something that you buy, which I think we're going to talk about later on, as in something that you buy that has been made by a studio, etc., which is probably another definition that we should use.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I suspect that and I think the next question we really need to try and digest is the word custom used correctly in the hobby? So we've kind of talked about other words or types of boards that would be custom, taking an OEM board, modifying it, whatever, a vintage board, something like that. Um, but are we using the word properly? Is the word custom really meaning what we explain it to mean, or what most people in the hobby take it to mean? How do you feel, Brian, on that?
yeah. Well, I think, like I mentioned earlier, it's a word that I think our community uses a lot, and we don't really think about it very much before we used it. I think it's kind of hard to nail down, right? Because the adjective of
Yeah.
custom is made or done to order. That seems pretty simple, right? I mean, just like you were mentioning earlier, all these like built from the ground up hand wire builds where you're kind of you're setting off to get your metal custom cut, and you're hand wiring all your switches and your diodes, and
Yeah,
you're doing all this kind of manual DIY labor yourself. It's kind of hard to argue that wouldn't be custom, right? I think we can all agree that something like that is custom. I think it's kind of what the term should mean in our hobby and kind of where we draw the line of what is and what is not a custom. Because I feel like just like a lot of things in our community, a lot of the terminology is kind of fluid. It doesn't really have like a
mm,
quantifiable absolute, as it were. I
sure.
think there's going to be a lot of boards where several people can point out, and lots of them will say that's a custom, and lots of others will say that is not a custom, not at all. And I think that's probably fine either way. I don't think that the goal of this show is necessarily to nail down one definitive point of what is and what is not a custom. More to just kind of keep your mind open and maybe hope that we're using the word properly as often as we can, because this community in general can get very confusing with a lot of the terminology, and if we have a little bit more open mindedness towards it, I think it'll make it a little bit easier for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I very much agree with what you were saying there. I think we need to really analyze what the word how the words are used in the common lexicon as well, because what the common lexicon can change is how the word's perceived and what it actually means in a certain context. And it might only take effect in a particular group or area of expertise rather than across the whole English language and taking all things into consideration. But for me, if you take the word custom at a whole, it's a derivative of customized, or customized is a derivative of custom. And if something's customized, then it's hard to say that if you paint something, or if you put a logo on something, or if you create your own plate and layout, it's hard to say that you haven't customized it, and therefore the word custom should stand. I suspect that the real word that we're or the real interpretation of the word that we actually use it for in the hobby, as rather than it being custom, is probably closer to bespoke.
Sure. Yeah, that's something we can get
Yeah.
into as well. In my very basic Google fooing before the stream, it seemed to me that bespoke and custom kind of go hand in hand, and they're almost interchangeable. I didn't really come across any super specific definitions of those in particular.
One of the things that I
Yeah.
would like to raise is just this, and I find that this is a very curious point to speak about, which is, difference between languages. And one of my podcast episodes when I was talking to Nathan Alphaman, we were talking about designer, and in Portuguese there's different words for different things, and meanings can be completely different. And I find that sometimes, this even in Portuguese, if you hear custom, which we use as in, obviously a Anglicanism that we use, but I think that is the important thing, is that the term itself means so much. And I saw that Foamaster and Huey were mentioning about, is it modification, modding compared to customization, but the word itself can mean a lot, right? Can mean so many different things. So, bespoke, as an example, when I arrived to, and we were talking about this before the show, but when I got to UK, it's when I really started to listen about bespoke. I wasn't really aware of that term, which is basically making something to fit your needs. So I think that, like we were talking before, the word itself can mean so much that I don't think that we should pigeonhole it in saying, oh, it's just this. But at the same time, that we need to understand that some things might not really be custom, as in, it could be like we're talking modification, right? As a, it's just something that you modified, and it's not really custom. You didn't create it from scratch. We could also raise that point as well. But, and like we're talking, where is the line drawn? Where do you guys think we should draw the line about customization? Should we just say that, I like a keyboard that I have that I posted on Reddit, that, I just grab a keyboard from shelf, I just paint it white and I put some caps on it. Is that a custom? Should we just draw the line that no, that's not a custom? Or is that more of a custom than something like I don't know, a GMMK Pro or something like that, that is just a OEM board that is just being sold as a custom? I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
and
just a
of course,
food for
Yeah.
thought, right?
Which is an interesting point actually, because if you take an OEM manufacturer and they design what we would class as a custom keyboard, they come out with something very similar to, say, a TGR Jane or whatever, and then they sell it en masse. Would
Yeah.
that make it a custom? If
Would it
if
still be a
uh,
custom?
if TGR just gave the Jane rights to, GMMK, and they made mass produce them, would that stop it being a custom?
Yeah.
that's another big question. I think we
Whoa.
need to ask ourselves there. Yeah, it gets really tricky when you start to get into some examples, right? I mean, obviously, like Vogon was mentioning, let's say you just buy an off-the-shelf keyboard. All you do is swap the keycaps, but you swap it to something that's, better for you, maybe more ergonomic for you, maybe more, pleasurable of a typing experience for you. You're making the keyboard better for you. You're modifying the keyboard. Is that custom in any way? These are the kind of
I think it
questions
depends.
that make it kind of difficult. And you could maybe
Yeah.
take it a slight step further, and we can bring up examples like the GMMK Pro, the NK65, M60A, any
Mhm.
board really that comes assembled with a hot swap PCB but no switches in it and no keycaps on it. Is it a custom just because you're
Yeah.
putting in the switches that you like?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because you could take this
Yeah.
outside of keyboards and you could apply it to different hobbies. So you could say, for example, on a car, if I changed the stock wheels that came with the vehicle and I put some brand new alloy wheels on there from BBS or wherever else, whatever manufacturer, would I have customized the car? Would I have modified the car? Now, legally, I don't know how it works in other countries, but legally in the UK, I would have to declare that it would be classed as a customized car, and I would have to have that on my insurance certificate because I'd modified it away from its original standard specification. Are keycaps and wheels kind of interchangeable when you think about it? I don't know. I think if you get to the level of switches and you're changing the way that the board inherently works, I think you're absolutely customizing it. I think if you're changing the way the board inherently looks in terms of its actual finish, so you're spray painting it, I think that's customizing it. I'm not sure how I feel about keycaps. Does simply
It's
changing the color of the
I
keycaps
agree.
make it customized?
I
it's
totally agree.
yeah, it's interesting because
Yeah.
Fumaster in chat says I would argue making modifications is modding, not custom. And then
Yeah.
Hue replies to that and says, "I would argue modification is customization, hence custom."
Yeah, I'd
There's a
agree. Yeah,
yeah,
with
it's
you.
yeah, there's like so many
But
terms that kind of
yeah.
mean the same thing, right? I mean, modification is sort of customization, right? I mean,
Yeah, modding and customizing are two interchangeable words in my head. Very much so. Now, I think that that's an interesting discussion point as well, because when we're talking about what we class as customs in the hobby, boards designed by designers and manufactured in small scale group buys or whatever else you want to pick on, you take any example board you'd like for that. Would we class those as modded? Probably not because but we class them as custom keyboards. I mean, they're a designed and manufactured product, which tends to be done on a more and more professional level at this point. At which point do we start to say that Novel Keys making the NK65 is an OEM? Where do we draw that line? There's some really interesting kind of points here as to how we need to cut it up. Do we say that once they produce 10,000 units, it becomes an OEM board? Because I wouldn't be surprised if the
I mean,
NK65 is somewhere in that region already. It's like, where does that line get drawn?
maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I feel like the amount of units sold has zero relevance on whether something is custom or not.
Ooh, interesting.
Mm,
Yeah, so I've always kind of felt
that's
that
a
off.
that's a
Let's like off the shelf. Like you can use the MK65 as an example. Obviously, that's a board that there are varieties that are just plug and play, right? There are some that come
Yep.
with they come with the switches installed, keycaps on. All you got to do is plug in the cable, and then there's varieties obviously that are they don't come with switches or keycaps, so you have to put your own
right.
switches and keycaps on there.
Yeah.
And then you have so like I've always felt OEM is kind of like a term where all I have to do is plug the board in and I'm good. I don't have to do any work other than that. I open up the
Interesting.
box.
Interesting. Okay.
It's already fully assembled. Keycaps already on. I don't have to install anything. All I have to do is plug in the cable, and off I go. There's
Question then.
Okay. Okay.
Would you
Okay. So
would you
just
consider
sorry, go on.
sorry, just this question then? Would you consider that an OEM board is something that you cannot again modify, as in soldered switches? Yes, you can change keycaps, but you know what I mean. One of those that you buy and it's all fixed and you cannot touch. As in, if you don't have the experience and you don't have the tools to unsolder everything, get new switches, would you consider that to be an OEM board? Doesn't matter how much,
it's
like you said, how many would be
And
sold.
and that's exactly where I was going to go as well, Virgon. So to Brian's point, I had a custom. I sold the JO1s, right? And I had about 100 customers ask me to build that board for them. When I ship those 100 boards out of maybe 500, that's one fifth, 20% of all of those boards are going to be shipped pre-built and ready to go straight out of the box, but the rest of them aren't. And like the NK65, you have NK65s that are shipped that need to be put together, add switches, keycaps, whatever, and you have other NK65s that are ready to go. So does that mean you could have two NK65s next to each other, and one would be an OEM board and one wouldn't? See, I'm not sure if that qualifies it either.
yeah, because I mean, let's say you get the pre-built NK65, right, and it comes with whatever switches are in it. It's not, let's say it's not exactly to your liking, right? It's not bespoke, because bespoke would be tailored to your every needs or whatever,
Correct. Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
sense of the word. So I feel like if you have an MK65 that you got that is fully assembled and you don't necessarily like it, is it a custom at all? Is it bespoke at all? And you can even take this example further. Let's say you send a key cult board to Nathan Kim to be built, and you choose your switches and he lubes them to your desire, and puts the keycaps on or whatever, and you get the board and you decide that it's 1 degree typing angle off from what you would like. Maybe it's half a pound heavier than you'd like. Is that still a bespoke board? Is it still tailored to all of your needs?
I think for it to be bespoke, I think it needs to be, to me in my head, bespoke means closer to it being a one-off, something that's just customized for you rather than
Yeah.
being customized for the vast majority of people. I think that's the difference between custom and bespoke in my head. Bespoke means it's down to your level of detail. So if you'd worked with say Zach and George over at Keycool, and you'd worked through the actual angle of the board yourselves directly, and every other number two out there was 7 degrees, but yours for whatever reason was 12 degrees in typing angle because that's what you wanted. I think that would lead it more to being the bespoke version of a keyboard. Or like when they've done the one-offs for Tifu and other people, I think they are bespoke because that's specific to that one person. There is no other board like it that is really bespoke. But I think when we talk about the actual customs and then versus the OEM, that's where I'm not sure what the difference and where the line needs to be.
Yeah, and I mean, some people. Oh, I think
Oh,
Jay, we might have lost you, Jay.
Jay
Jay's
is
frozen in a pretty good screen to be
frozen.
frozen on, if I
Yes.
do say so myself. Um, Hopefully
I would like to
we'll.
just point out while that's happening, I would just like to point out Static Age's post.
Sure.
I personally feel that our keyboard in this our keyboards in this hobby are not custom, rather customizable. Custom to me means that I have had input into the overall design of the product to adjust it to my personal preference. In this case, I am buying something that I was designed to be modified to my personal preference, and then I build it the way I want and customize it. That's probably what we were talking about bespoke.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
It's
That
something made for yourself.
Yeah, bespoke, at least from the definition that I've seen and from what I kind of feel about it, is it's exactly kind of like what you want, right? It's the most tailor made to you it can be. Whereas custom is it doesn't necessarily need to be tailor made to you. It just needs to be, it just needs
Correct.
to be like made, basically.
Oh wait, I'm
Made to
not.
order, done to order.
No, I'm just turned into Jay.
It's
No.
okay. I think Jay's back now, and that's the problem. If someone leaves a Discord call, all the cropping just gets all wonky. So
There we
apologies for
go.
that, guys.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. I don't know what
Uh,
happened. I wasn't near the router, but it went off.
had,
But
ooh,
but,
that's
but honestly, yeah, and cool, dude. You're right. Is this? And I think it's an important thing that we had even that point is that custom versus customizing. Is that are we using the term correctly then? Are we using custom as and I think we do. We use custom as an all encompassing word.
we use it very
As an example.
broadly, very
Exactly.
broadly.
As an example, I consider that one of my boards is truly custom because I did it with my own, idea of how I wanted to do it. And yes, there's tons of boards like that, but this one is custom because there's not any other in the world like it, right? But it's still an OEM board,
Yeah.
right?
Sure,
So,
sure.
I feel
so
like this is a really. Oh,
yeah,
sorry to cut you off. Hogan. I think this is a
no,
really
go
good
ahead.
time to pick out something from chat that I saw that kind of goes along with this. And this is one of these examples where I feel like a lot of people have different kind of descriptors of what custom could mean. Pentium Math in chat says change only keycaps, not custom. Change switches,
No,
custom. It's literally not off the shelf. You choose the switch. So an interesting take on it. Swapping switches or adding your own switches that you like, custom. Swapping out the keycaps for something that you like, not necessarily custom. I would disagree on that perfectly. I don't see why changing the keycaps is any less impactful than changing the switches per se. Switches or keycaps can have just as much of an impact on the typing experience. You have lots of different profiles, you have different materials, different qualities of keycap. It's almost as varied as something like switches, where you have lots of different switch types. You have lots of different keycap types as well. I would argue they're just as impactful and they're just the same on the level of customizability as each other. Personally, that's kind of how I feel. Obviously, there is no quantifiable absolute. That's why we're just talking about this, and these are our opinions as well.
yeah.
So, what do you guys feel about that,
Yeah.
guys? Is changing keycaps not custom, but changing switches is custom?
I think I think I think if a board ships with switches in and you take those switches out and put your own switches in, that absolutely customizing the keyboard, that makes it
No,
custom in my head.
I
Does
agree.
it make it custom as in what we class as like we sell through the vendors these days? Probably not, but it does feel like it's being customized at that point. I don't know how I feel about just changing keycaps. Like I gave the example of the wheels on a car earlier on. I'm not sure if that qualifies it in my head or not, but maybe that's because it doesn't require any technical knowledge to do. I think
That, yeah,
to
that's
truly
what's
modify
yeah.
something, you need some sort of skill or technical knowledge implied. So whether that be painting and you need some skill in painting, or whether you need to solder something or desolder something and it needs a technical skill. I think that the difference between customization and it being a custom and modification, whatever word you want to choose, and it not being custom is down to it needing some sort of technical ability or skill applied to a product to transform it into something new. I don't feel that changing keycaps needs that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I
Interesting.
agree. And Nubs of Fury actually posted something which is curious, which is if you had your car repainting to a non-factory color, would that be a custom car? I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's just a
No,
car painted with a different color, and that's
but
and I
on
agree
your
with that.
insurance it would be. On your insurance it would be
Unless
classed as a customized car.
now, then we can put like you were talking, Jay. Now we can put another, how do you call it, another factor into it. And what about if it was you that painted that car in your own garage with, your own skills about it? Would then that make it custom compared to you just going into a body shop and having it painted with whatever color by a pro?
I think either of those would classify it as a custom car because it's a custom paint job on the car. If I think the easier definition isn't the paint on the car, it's the wheels. If you take it to the wheels and say if I put new rims on my car, does that make it custom? I think
I
that's the
agree with you.
that's the equivalent
That
one to
for
keycap.
me, I have the same. I have the
I
same
don't
same idea.
know.
Yeah, if you put some
Just don't know.
yeah, if you just buy some rims and you put it in, it's not a custom car.
I really didn't
I
think
don't.
we'd have.
I wouldn't think so. At
I
least
really
me
didn't,
personally.
wasn't expecting us to have such different actual like opinions going into this because we hadn't really talked about this going into the show. But yeah, I feel like I'm already disagreeing with you guys on some things, which actually
There we
makes
go.
the show more interesting,
Good.
and I like
Good.
that.
Yeah, no, it is good. It is good because again, we talked about OEMs and what's the difference between a niche bespoke manufacturer and an OEM, and I think volume is one of the descriptors of that, and you were very much against that, Brian, which is quite
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I just got to point out, just for my own ego, that Sean DePulse in chat says, I agree with Brian on the quantity point. If you make 300 or 100,000 TGR Janes, does that make it any less custom? It's a good point.
And
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
that's a
that's the
tough
question I
one.
asked earlier on, isn't it? Like I said, that with the
Yeah.
NK65, how many does Mike need to produce for them to be classed as an OEM product
Well, I think he
rather than a
has.
custom? And you can take it the other way. If you go to Philco and you ask them to make a one-off Philco just for you, or 10 of them, say let's say a small batch of 10 keyboards. Now you don't choose the specification or anything. You just say I want 10 keyboards, and you just only ever make those 10 of a new product. Is that custom? I don't know. Like,
Yeah,
it's
well,
difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to define.
Yeah.
immediately after that, Maxed Feeling says, so Milkshake NK65 is OEM, but Entry Edition NK65 is custom. And just for reference, the Milkshake NK65 is one of the fully assembled ones that I was talking about that comes with the switches and
Yeah.
keycaps already. So here's the thing, right? To sell a fully built keyboard like that, there are legal certifications you have to have. And I think that is one of the crossing points of an OEM. You're selling a fully built board, it's plug and play, you unbox it, you plug it in, you're ready to go. You don't have to do any kind of customization, no kind of modification. I would agree that the Milkshake NK65 is an OEM keyboard, but yes, the entry level NK65 is a custom. And you got to also realize that we're kind of at like the ground level when it comes to things like this. This is still very new to us. We haven't really had keyboard
Correct.
products like this hit the market until very, very recently, over the last year or two, really.
Yeah.
So, this is something that the community has never really gotten together and decided, which is another reason why we're kind of just brainstorming it at this level, as it were.
Sure, for sure. And it's worthwhile pointing out as well that while some of us are giving our real opinions on certain topics, all of us are playing devil's advocate with other sides
Yes.
of the topics as well. So just bear that in mind, guys.
Correct.
Just as a point of that, Streaking Bison just said, how about the GMMK Pro? That seems like a good one for this debate. I agree, it is a good one for this debate. And in my head, that's an OEM board straight out of the box.
Yeah.
I've always considered it an OEM board. But Brian, you've had hands-on with one. How do you
I,
feel about that?
I'm actually currently using one. Yeah, this is why I think this topic is such a good topic for us to be discussing. Because I'll be honest with you, Jay, I have no goddamn clue. I really don't know. A part of me wants to agree with you, and I want to say it's an OEM because it requires so little work to actually, get up and running. But at the same time,
Yeah.
I'm deciding on what switches I want to put on there. I'm deciding on my keycaps. Maybe I'm changing the plate material because they offer several plate varieties on their site. It's
Being bored, right? I don't know. It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a difficult one.
I feel like if someone,
Yeah,
I
I guess.
probably
Yeah.
wouldn't argue against you if you were like, this is absolutely an OEM, and if you disagree with me, then you're stupid. I'd be like, well, all right.
Well,
But
the point I was going to make, and Static Age has brought this up because he's got a really good idea there. And this is where I was going to play devil's advocate with you. And he says, I had to do as much work to build up my GMMK Pro as I had to do with building my AIO3 designed Vega. So is the Vega an OEM board too? And I think this is where we're actually starting to get into some really difficult questions. And I think it's less about the product and more about who makes it that makes it an OEM board. I think it's more about who produces it and manufactures it as to whether it's actually an OEM board or not.
okay, so Keycult's producing custom keyboards, the number one, for example. If Corsair bought that design and sold it exactly as Keycult is, it would be an OEM.
Yeah.
Even though
For,
you
for
have to
at
solder
least,
your own switches.
Yeah,
I
I feel like
think.
it would be an
Yeah.
OEM board.
Even if you have
I
to
think
solder
for,
your switches and all that stuff, it's still an OEM board.
I would
I,
say
I think so.
no. I don't know. At least for me, I wouldn't say so.
Some see
It's
Vogon
so
splits now.
it's so complicated. That's why I think that's why the topic is so fascinating, right? Because we go back to the beginning. What makes a board custom? And it's there's so many elements to this that make it. We have like Jay was saying, we're advocates for both of the situations, right? And I can be on one side and immediately change to the other, going like, oh yeah, but no, right? So it's a very interesting topic because of that. What really makes it custom, right? Would we say that in the end it's just custom is making a keyboard that you yourself want to use, that is only yours and no one else uses? Would that
I
be
think that's
considered as a
more of
custom?
bespoke. No, I think that comes under the term bespoke, but I think it
Yeah,
could be custom as well. And I guess the flip side to this as well is I'm going back to that point I made about technical skill earlier on. So you need to have some sort of technical skill applied to a board to class it as a custom. And in my head, all of the customs need to be built or assembled in some way, and that gives you the technical skill. But then I was thinking, well, what does that mean for hot swap? Because that's just plug and play, right? It's just a plug and
correct.
play item.
It's
There's
no
no
different
skill
than
involved there.
keycaps.
It's like
Yeah.
changing keycaps, right? Exactly. Yeah, it's no different to changing
Yeah,
keycaps. And if I didn't classify changing keycaps as customization, do I classify hot swap as customization? And I was questioning myself, and then I realized that there's been custom keyboard group buys that have only offered a hot swap board. Look at some of the Rama products, for example, and some others. They've
There's another
only
one,
offered in
yeah.
the group buy. They've only offered a hot swap PCB. And at that point, do I then stop calling them a custom keyboard? I genuinely do not know where the line is drawn on this. I don't think that there is a satisfactory definition that anyone could write and give to me and say that is what a custom keyboard means in this hobby. But I think all of us intrinsically know whether something's a custom keyboard or not. And I don't think we can ever put into words what that means.
yeah, I agree.
It's
Yeah.
it's
And
an
Lunar,
intangible definition.
yeah, Lunar Sama is saying, I would consider keyboard OEM when one, it's easily accessible, two, cannot be modified except keycaps, and three, mass produced. Now,
Well,
point two, you can easily modify. Again, like
that's
we
the
were
thing,
talking, it just
right?
takes
Like,
skill. It just
yeah.
takes skill. You can unassemble it, and you can desolder. You can modify it. So that part is hard to define because of that. Because you can always modify one keyboard. You can modify
Yeah.
keyboards which are from 1930. You can modify them. You
Yeah.
can hand wire them. You can do a lot of things. But so
When are we going to
are
see a
we?
Vogon Enigma machine modification stream? When are we going to see that?
No, but you know what I mean. But at a, so I would say, can we say that the custom is something that is not easily accessible and mass produced? Because then we go back to what we were talking before. But then what happens if Keycult all of a sudden starts throwing out 5,000 Keycult number ones instead of
Yeah.
100? is that
Yeah,
then just no longer a custom and it's
what's
just an OEM board?
yeah, what's
It's interesting because volume was one of my descriptors for what makes something OEM and not custom.
what's
And
the
Yes,
cutoff? What's the number Keycold has to sell to no longer be considered a custom
makes
keyboard,
sense.
correct,
assuming they change
correct.
Is it,
nothing
is it,
else?
is it, is it 5,000? Because I'm pretty sure they're past that. Is it 10,000? Because they're getting close to that. Maybe I don't know the actual numbers, but I
Yeah,
would imagine they're close to 10K. Is it 100K? I don't
Yeah. See,
know.
I feel like the actual makeup of the product itself is the defining factor of whether something is custom. I think volume has nothing to do with it, but obviously we've already talked about that, and at least one person agreed
Yeah.
with me, which is all I need.
I think coming back to it, I'm still falling back to this. It needs an element of technical skill, but I think I need to revise that. And it's not that it needs technical skill, but it needs an active involvement of physically manifesting a change to a keyboard, whether that's putting it
But
together and building it for the first time,
you
I
would
think
you would
that's a
constructing it or
better,
something like that.
yeah,
but
that's a
you
better term.
also stated that Keycolt would not be OEM, or no, I'm sorry, Keycolt would be OEM if you had to solder it, as long as they sold X amount of units, whatever your
Yeah,
XA
so,
said.
so my caveat is it needs to be sold in a small number of units, which I don't have a definition of, so don't ask me for what's a small number of units. It has to be a small number of units. It has to have some element of user input to actually make it into a working product, right? It can't just be working out of the box. You have to have some element of input to make it physically a keyboard as we would know a keyboard.
Work has to be put into the
And
product before use.
yeah, or it has to have the ability to be changed without breaking a warranty. I think that's a good way of putting it. So you have to have the ability to amend the keyboard without breaking a warranty. Because if you buy it from an OEM and you desolder the switches, you lose your warranty. Whereas if you do that with a board from me or Canon keys or Novel keys and you desolder some switches and your PCB doesn't work, they're going to give you a replacement PCB, right? So I think that that's the key thing. You have to be able to change it without damaging a warranty
Okay.
on some level.
Uh, I would agree. One of the things I would like to say again, playing devil's advocate tonight. If people listen to my
Always.
podcast, they know that I'm very against certain terms and I'm very against certain things. But I think that what Jay said about maybe not technical skill, as in downplaying people that don't really have that advanced skill, but maybe like you said, user intervention. Something you
Yeah,
need to do something to change that board, right? Doesn't really mean, and again, we could go, oh, something was just changing keycaps because it's the only thing he did, he knew. But I think, he, at a more higher level, yes, you need to have a bit of understanding, but you made something different from the board, but not really as in technical, going into the thing of, oh, you don't know how to solder, you're not, it's not a custom because you don't know how to do it. No,
sure.
again, in that sense, it could be that it's perfectly custom because you chose the switch for you and you loop that switch. You don't know how to solder, but you know how to loop, and you loop the switch and you change. This as an example. We're talking about keyboards. What about switches? What makes a switch custom? Would a Gatron yellow with a looped, being looped, make it custom compared to a stock Gatron yellow?
Yeah,
Is
in
it
my
that
mind, it's custom.
also?
You've
Is it
stripped the
custom?
switch down. You've applied lubricant. You have
Correct.
customized that switch. It's not a stock switch, right? It's
Correct.
it's it's not stock as the manufacturer
The
intended.
thing about that
But
is, we rarely use the term custom for switches, and we almost always prefer the term modify.
Yes.
yeah. But I
Nobody's
think
going
those
to
are
argue
interchangeable in my
there.
head.
Yeah, no one's going to argue that a lube switch hasn't been modified, right? Assuming it was lubed not from the factory. If it comes like that from the factory, NK silks, for example, come, quote unquote, fully lubed.
Sure.
That's still a stock switch, even though it has
Yeah, I
if it
would
has
agree.
potential
Yeah,
Yeah.
modifications
it
that
has, it has, it
other
has to be
switches wouldn't.
lubed by the end user, right? Or a friend thereof or an acquaintance thereof. It
Sure,
has
Correct.
to be
a
lubed
third
by a
party, we can
person
say.
in the process. Yeah. So somewhere between the manufacturing process being complete and it passing quality control and it ending up typing in a keyboard, it has to be modified somewhere in that gap, right? That's what makes that switch
I
customized
think we could
or
all agree
modded
on
or
that.
whatever
Hopefully,
word you want to use, whatever adjective you want to drop in that.
yeah.
If
Dopamine
it's
in
new,
chat says.
it's not as intended.
Dopamine in chat says, "How about this? An OEM board is a board where the manufacturer dictates 100% of the typing experience, while a custom is a board where the manufacturer only has partial input on the final typing experience." I think that's kind of.
It's good.
I feel like that's probably the
Good.
most popular kind of way to look at it in our hobby, right? Because a lot of people will see a board like you brought up Rama boards earlier, Jay. I would say the the M60A, for example, it had a hot swap. I think it might have only had a hot swap option. I can't remember. I have the
It did.
board. It's
They've got a solvable PCB now, I believe, but I
oh,
think
okay.
originally it was only hot swap. Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so obviously hot swap board. You put the PCB in. You put switches in. Whatever. A lot of people would call that custom. I think very few people would argue that that's a truly OEM board, right? I think very few people would argue that.
And I think everyone would argue against Rama being an OEM. If you asked, is Rama an OEM manufacturer, everyone would say no, he's not.
Yeah, it's not.
So
Yeah, exactly.
that brings up a secondary question: where do you transition from being an enthusiast maker to an OEM? Anyway, that's a different discussion.
Which is why I don't like the quantity basis for an OEM personally. That's my personal feelings, obviously.
Maybe. I think quantity does play a part, but I think it's bigger numbers than we're used to. So maybe. Anyway, go on. Sorry, Brian. We're digressing.
No, I was just trying to reply to that comment in chat because I feel like that's a pretty common way to look at it, right? Because
but we can throw
we
can throw a spanner on that too, because you can say that
every
even
keyboard
though
is modifiable.
That no, and the thing is that that okay, the manufacturer that dictates 100% of the typing experience. Are we talking about key layout? What about if that board allows me to change, function rows or something like that? Would that then,
is
it's
key map customizing it? I would argue yes, it is.
That changes the typing experience. It doesn't affect anything physically, though, right? There's nothing physical per se about that. It's all digital.
But it's still, but then technically it's still custom to you. You've customized the layout to be exactly what you want, and and you can say that I use the Dvorak. I don't use QWERTY, and I bought this board which is QWERTY, and I'm using the Dvorak.
Yeah, that's an
customizing that board.
That's an established format, though, right? Like that's not because you wouldn't say it's custom. You wouldn't ever say it's custom because you're typing in QWERTY. Why would you say it because you're typing in Dvorak or Colmac or something?
But perhaps it's simple as that. Perhaps you've just changed a few of your keys around, right? You've changed around what happens on your function layer or something like that. So you've got a custom key map. Maybe it has a couple of macros in there that type in, I don't know, your email address. You have it as one button click or whatever, or certain passwords as a click or whatever. Just thinking of some common mods. But it does bring an interesting question. Does customizing the software that your keyboard uses to be interpreted by your operating system, does changing that or making an adjustment to it count as a customization or modification? So if okay, a good example of this, Brian. If I gave you an OEM board and I gave the same one to Mech Merlin, and Mech Merlin backwards compatibility ported that into VIA, would that class as a customization?
Yeah, true.
I think when you change what the keyboard is capable of doing, i.e., porting something to QMK or VIA or whatever that wouldn't have otherwise been there, that definitely makes for a custom keyboard, in my opinion. However, I would say that, I would say that just changing the layout. Let's say that the keyboard ships with software that you can change the layout with, or whatever, like Corsair or whatever.
Cool. Sure.
And you change your layout. You change something that works for you. That is absolutely a custom layout that is made for you. You have made that for yourself. However, it doesn't physically change like the keyboard itself. And I feel like because of that, while it is a custom layout, it's not necessarily a custom keyboard.
I'm not sure I subscribe to the view that a change has to be physical to be classed as customization.
Yeah. But
I agree in the term. I agree in the context of keyboards, I think.
Okay, so then
in the context of keyboards.
Well, a keyboard is a physical product, and I feel like it needs physical differences to be different.
Yeah, because
I don't know. Okay. I don't know. This is difficult.
Throwing more wood into the fire. Then
yes,
would you
please.
say that if you have a RGB keyboard, just changing the color of your RGB makes it custom?
No, that's not customizing. No, right? That's using a pre-existing setting. That's not customizing.
But if we think about it, it's the same thing as changing a key map.
I agree with Vogon on this
software.
one, actually. Yeah.
If we think about it in these very objective terms, it's the same thing as, yes, it makes it custom because you're used to doing your control on your caps lock or something like that. It changes
You
your
can.
typing experience,
Okay.
but technically it's the same as changing the color on your RGB.
I would take it a
It's
step
I think
further,
it's a little
Vogon.
bit different than that. No,
Lighting
I think it's a little bit different than that.
lighting can
I think it is.
absolutely be for functional purposes as well, too. Let's say you're typing in
correct.
the dark and you need specific keys lit more than others.
Lighting or whatever. Yeah.
There's actual a functional benefit to lighting if you want there to be one. And
Yeah, I never.
I would say
No one
that's
ever thought that RGB would be put into this talk, but I made it.
No.
I'm just joking, guys.
This still quite me. Okay, so my view on this example, and bear in mind that I've had 0 time to think about it, but my view on this example off the top of my head is that if you're using the software that's provided with the board, and you're customizing the layout or the RGBs within the realms of the software that's shipped to the board, that's not customization. That's just using the existing settings and tweaking the preferences to your likability. I think if you change the firmware that the board runs on, so if you change it from the Corsair software and you get it backwards compatibility imported into VIA, for example, and then you start to use VIA to create custom macros and do things, I think that is a customization because you've actually customized and you've changed the firmware that the device runs on. You might not have actually changed its functionality at all because it might still offer the same things as it offered before, but it offers it through a different set of software and it's not supported by the manufacturer. At that point, it's not supported by the OEM because they would say, no, we can't do anything. And it comes back to that point of, is it within a warranty? Any non-warranty change with an OEM board becomes a customization, I think. Maybe,
sure.
possibly.
Sure. I could get behind that. Yeah.
It's yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that's
I
a
would
fair
probably
point.
the hipster in me would probably classify it as an OEM board running custom firmware or like an OEM board
Sure.
running a custom PCB.
But I think that's still customization. I think that's still a fair customization.
Yeah, if someone
Just changing it within the parameters of its own software, no, that's not customization.
if someone showed that
Creating a
that
new
to me,
software for it, yeah.
yeah, if someone showed that to me and was like, "This is my custom keyboard," I'd be like, "Okay." I wouldn't really argue against them in that sense.
Sure.
But if they had like a Corsair keyboard and physically nothing was different, all they did was they changed caps lock to control. I wouldn't be like, that's not really a
No,
custom
that's, yeah,
keyboard.
that's not.
No, I agree.
that's-
I agree.
know,
That's
yeah,
not customizing.
I agree. Yeah.
It has to go back to that whole point, and I think it's not the technical knowledge necessarily because you could have someone else do it for you, or whatever. It could be a one button click. It could be dead easy. But I think it comes back to that whole point. It's not as the manufacturer intended, right? The manufacturer intended to ship product A. You now have product A plus B, right? You've got something else added on there because you've done something different, and I think that is where it becomes a customized keyboard. But I still don't think that tweaks it into the realm of custom keyboards as we call them in the hobby.
Yes.
And
Again,
that's the definition.
yes.
I don't know where it is,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I'm
I
really
think,
struggling to find the legend of it.
I think that we all sort of agree on customization, but not custom. In
Yeah.
the
Yes.
term.
And that what I
That's
will
right.
I will
Yeah.
point out that that's also totally fine because like I brought up before earlier in the stream, I feel like the hobby is still kind of fresh in the sense of using the term custom, even though we've been using it for years now, obviously. I think that we've never really defined what customs technically are in the hobby. And I'm not saying we necessarily need to, but again, this is kind of just an open-minded brainstorming sort of discussion, and that's the kind of thought-provoking stuff that we like to do. But at the same time, you could also say that we are the type of people, not necessarily just us on the stream, but I mean people in chat, all you guys, all you consumers and enthusiasts. We are the type of people that are going to be dictating the way a lot of the terminology is going to be used going forward.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are coming into the hobby are going to look for people like us and to ask and clarify what customs actually are, because the line's only going to get more and more blurred as time goes on. With a lot of our vendors and manufacturers kind of converting to mainstream, I guess, if you will. I hate using that term, but as we get a lot bigger and we start to produce a lot more product and we start to do a lot of things that are more legally certified as an OEM, for example, things are going to be a lot more blurred. I feel like in the definitions.
Just on that, someone's DM'd me and they've asked not to be named, but they're watching, so they know who they are, and they've said you become an OEM when your products are available on Amazon. That's the definition.
That's certainly a way to look
I
at
don't
it.
disagree with them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say that, we have to think that our hobby is growing exponentially, and we had the first case, but we had the first case with GMMK coming into the hobby and trying to make this, whatever board
Yeah.
that they want to call it. But we have to expect that very soon, you know, Corsairs, which still have their own market, and Logitechs and all these big, big, big sharks are going to start looking at these boards and looking at GMMK, etc. And they're going to start wanting a piece of that action too, because our hobby is growing so much that they're going to understand that there's a market there and that they can charge more than just a keyboard with a six U spacebar that no one uses in the hobby. So I'm
Apart from
thinking,
AKB James, he uses 6U.
yes, but AKB James is AKB James, and we understand that
Sure,
some
yeah.
people
He's
are
kind of off in his own world. We'll say.
Yeah. It's
big
really
love,
interesting, actually.
big love to
Do,
James.
do, do you know? Do you know? Do you know what I think would be what I think will be the next big boom in this hobby that will show growth, and I think we've had a couple bits over the last couple of years. We've had Nathan Kim breaking it big, building Tfu's board and everything else, and then we've had the growth and exposure that the pandemic created on us when people wanted flashy keyboards for being at home. I think the next big thing we will see is when the gamer market starts to get hold of the hobby, which is when Corsair or Philco, one of the big brands that people in the gaming hobbies tend to look at, realize that custom keyboards are kind of a thing and selling really well and making good money. And they take one of our designers out of the community. They take AIO3 or AKB James or Yutzi
And they
or
pay,
whoever,
they write them a big
and
check, and
they
just time
put,
for it
a TGR or an Alchemist keyboard
tomorrow.
or a Keycall
Yeah,
there as an OEM product that they
yeah,
manufacture an absolute ton of and sell out within minutes, because all of a sudden the big gaming
yeah.
companies are using them, the big esports teams are using them. I think that will be the next big growth of our hobby, and that will see an enormous amount of volume of custom keyboards being required to be sold, to be bought by people,
I agree.
significantly more than we have now.
Yeah.
As
But
we was
then,
mentioning the Corsair, and I think the difference there is we that didn't really do that well, but I think it did get quite a lot of publicity and it did help bring people into the hobby. I know quite a lot of people mentioned to me that that was their first keyboard and that's how they got into the hobby and they realized custom keyboards exist. But I think if it happens
yeah,
with a bigger name, I think that's going to be the trick.
and like you're saying, Jay, yes, definitely. If they, and we again going back to GMMK, that looked at the hype, like we say, and built this board that basically, like we spoke a long time ago, it's based on a lot of hype words, but it was made looking at the hobby. If a big company like that just decides to hire someone to make it for them, and they start selling them, and instead of selling them, we already have like Razer keyboards and Corsair keyboards going for 150 to 100 pounds. uh, what's stopping them from selling it 250 and selling a fully aluminium kit? You know,
Yeah, or $400 and it weighs 2 kilograms and it's got a chunk of
correct.
brass in the bottom of it,
And
and
they can, because they have the volume to just make it that cost. They can reduce the cost because they have the volume for it. So,
yeah.
It's only a
you
matter
never
of
know.
time. It really is.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. As the hobby is growing, and then now I'm joking, but we're going to look like the old man in the. Oh, in my time, this wasn't keyboards.
This
Custom keyboards in my time were keyboards that we
this is
used
the
to
keyboard
build.
boomer stream. You're right at home here,
Yeah,
Vogon. It's
right.
okay.
That's it. Everyone who's in the hobby today is in on the ground floor, and we are the future keyboard boomers because the
Yeah,
market's going to change
Yeah.
and trend away from us. That's absolutely true. Do you know what this podcast reminds me of today? It reminds me of that Cryosran video from a few years ago where he was trying to define what a mechanical keyboard is, and he couldn't come up with a real definition of what mechanical keyboard is,
yeah,
other than the fact that you just know it when you type on it. Because if you think about it, it's really difficult. Mechanical keyboard means it's mechanical key press, right? You have to press something, actuate something that does the thing. But
yeah.
when you
Then
really take it back
operate
to its
them. Yeah,
broad level,
yeah.
it means that a rubber dome is a mechanical keyboard
Yeah.
because you're
Correct.
pressing a button
If it
that's
has
having
moving parts,
yeah,
it's mechanical,
Yeah.
basically.
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
Um,
what you could classify, I think, in that video, and this is going from memory, was that one that laser imprints onto the desk. And he said that's the only one that's not mechanical because there's no moving parts. Everything else is mechanical.
Yeah.
It's
I
interesting
think
because I think our conversation is it's cyclical in that kind of nature here as well when talking about customs.
one definition I've always kind of felt true to with mechanical keyboards is that to be mechanical, each switch had to be an individual mechanism. versus like a sheet of rubber dome, for example.
Sure. But each one is individually mechanical because it's each a little piece of
It's
Correct.
metal that touches on a custom trace, right? So I don't
yeah.
That's
know.
the thing.
I
Yeah,
don't
there's
know.
a little bit of of rubber that just goes down into their own
Can
its own
we?
contact, so
Yeah.
How
it's
about
individual.
this?
So
I'm going to propose something totally wild here, guys. How about from here on out, we no longer we no longer use the term mechanical keyboards. We use fancy keyboards instead. And
Fancy
the
keyboard. Hey,
definition of a fancy keyboard is
that
it's
lit
not a membrane keyboard.
lit keyboards. What
Lit
about that?
keyboards. There
What
we
about
go.
Topra though? Because Topra is just fancy rubber dome, right? So
It
It's
is.
true. And I love Topra, and
I want to.
I've long thought Topra is mechanical, and but there's no arguing that it's a rubber dome keyboard. But you can't argue that it's a lot higher quality than most rubber dome keyboards. I mean, it's like comparing
sure.
like a really nice burger to like a really shitty fast food burger, right? Like they're both still
Yeah, right,
burgers, but
yeah,
one of them could be a lot better than the others.
Yeah.
Um,
But again,
sure,
I'm not going to talk about
sure.
Topper because then people are going to crucify me because for me, yes, it's a rubber dome.
it's a rubber dome, but not all rubber domes
Don't get
are
me
created
wrong.
equally. Just
I
not
agree.
just
I
like
agree
not
with
all
your
mechanical
analogy.
keyboards
I
have the
agree.
same.
To be fair,
I agree
Brian,
with your analogy with burgers. That I agree
I'm
totally. Yeah, that it's two different types of burgers, but for me, they're still burgers.
Yes.
That's basically what
sure.
it is. So,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I'm a mechanical keyboard enthusiast. I have a lot of keyboards, but I don't own a single Sopra keyboard.
Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
have some awesome keyboards behind me. They're nice. They're custom. They're bespoke, if you will. They're all fancified. They're very fancy. But in my closet, I also have a $20 Velocifier TKL that I got years ago. It's a terrible keyboard, absolutely awful. But it's a mechanical keyboard, and that just goes to show you that mechanical doesn't necessarily mean better. It's just a different kind of keyboard. And, in the same sense that you can have really bad or really good mechanical keyboards, you can have really bad or really good rubber dome keyboards.
Correct.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But you can never have a good foil and foam keyboard. I think
We
that's that,
don't.
that that's
Well,
that's pretty.
that's a throwback. Shred Major.
It is right.
Shred
Yeah.
Major in chat
Oh,
says
this is
Razor Huntsman Gourmet Edition coming 2022.
maybe. So he's going to be out there making gourmet edition keyboards. Yeah. Shred Major also has another good point. He says one feeling I've been getting lately is that the mechanical keyboard community is growing increasingly disconnected from actual consumers. You either have your hand in the cookie jar and you can get whatever you want, or you don't. I could be wrong here, but that's the trend I've noticed throughout the year. I think that's really interesting because I often get told that there's a perception that I get access to more group buys than other people, and other influencers get more access to group buys than just the regular consumers and things like that. But speaking from experience, I think the difference is that those people who are well known, who have a name, your Lightnings of the world, your whoever you want to pick as an influencer or personality within the hobby, they just enter for that much stuff that it looks like the volume that they get is significantly greater, whereas the average person would enter significantly less volume. For every 10 keyboards that one of the avid collectors enters, the average person might only enter one. So it looks like people are winning more and more raffles and things like that than they really are. It's just the sheer volume of stuff that some of the really high-end collectors go in for. I think that's what you're trying to get to, and that's probably my take on that.
Yeah, I feel like very
I would
few
have a take.
people
Yeah.
get like whatever they want. I feel like
Yeah.
that's
Do you get
rare.
offered anything, Brian? Did you
Yeah.
get offered anything?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Obviously, I've been offered stuff, and doing something like this obviously has historically its benefits, right? I mean, I have an NK65 back there that I got from Novel Keys, and it was one of those things I didn't even ask for one. I was gonna ask for one, but then Mike just sent them to us, so it was like.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've gotten several things for free in the community. I won't deny that. I can't lie about that.
Yeah, but
But like if like I feel like this example isn't necessarily about. This is more like maybe if, like for the raffle kind of thing. Maybe more with like artisans. Maybe Keycold, for example. Like
That was where I was going for.
I don't
Yeah, like
have I've
get
never gotten a
preferential
key
treatment in
cult
those.
or whatever because of who I am, right? Like I've never entered a key cult raffle and been like guaranteed a win. Like I'll lose the key cult
Sure, same
raffles
here.
just like everyone else will.
You know,
So
I want to
By
just
the way,
raise.
the reason I own a key cut is because I commissioned one. That's literally the only reason I own one, because I've never won a raffle and I've entered almost every single one.
yeah,
I just wanted to raise that part about growing increasingly disconnected from actual consumers, right? And if you look at, as an example, hardware, computer, PC building, J's 2 cents, Linus, these guys get sent 3080 Ti's, whatever, right? Then there's this huge shortage, and they get sent it, and they do reviews on it, and it's because of that, because this is marketing dollars that companies are making, and we have to understand that even in our community that happens, even if it's much smaller than Nvidia's, than other things. This is a reality of the game, and things happen. So obviously that you will see that the community, as in the people that show on streams that are more visible, they're obviously behind. There's the marketing behind. If I have a brand and I want my keyboard to be shown in order to be sold, it's in my interest to send it to Teja, to send it to Clack, to send it to all of these streamers, so that they build it, so that it creates the hype and creates the attraction to the board. Because if I just put it on a website, no one's going to buy it. So we have to understand that, yes, it's true that I also feel that, you have a bit of a feeling that sometimes you don't see the, the budget side, which I hate to know the word, but, that budget side of the hobby. And there's not this really, attention to this part, and to making the idea that, no, it's okay for you to have a 150-pound board and it'd be totally happy and be an amazing board and the amazing quality. But the truth is that it doesn't happen on other situations, like on hardware streams, where they're going to show you the latest Ryzen Threadripper, and here is a PC built for 5K that you're not going to have, and most of the time you cannot even get the parts nowadays. But
yeah,
are
I mean,
they? Yeah, they're
it's
just showing it to you.
it's a
It's marketing.
promotion. It's promotional, right?
Correct.
It's promotional
Correct.
content, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But obviously,
No,
I'm
that's how the
biased.
world works. That's how the world works for me. That's normal.
Yeah,
That's something
that's
very normal.
pretty normal. Yeah.
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 I mean, everyone's been exposed to it too. I mean, even as something as simple as watching a commercial on your favorite TV network, right?
Right.
Like,
For sure.
there's always some kind of promotion going on there.
I think there's two distinct parts here for me. There's one being sent promotional items to promote on stream and talk about, whether that's like you got the GMMK Pro, for example. They sent that to you for free. You were asked to take a look at it. You gave a bit of a stream and a review, gave your honest opinion, and that was that, right? I think there's very much a difference between that and then getting preferential treatment when you enter a raffle, for example. Those two things
Oh,
are very
correct.
different, and
Correct.
I
Yeah.
don't see any of that. And I know from speaking with other designers and other vendors that they might look at a list of potential people who are going to win, and they'll say, "Oh, I recognize that person's name and that person's name and that email address. I think is that person." But that doesn't mean that they put any weighting towards those people. It's just completely random when they draw the raffles at that point. But everyone always gets called out for shenanigans anyway when they do it, so you can't win.
Yeah.
No, I agree. But Jay, like you were saying, and I agree that it's not in that sense of the raffles, but I wouldn't doubt, and again, I have no connection with them, but I wouldn't doubt, as an example, that Keycult would, on their marketing budget, have one or two boards that they manufacture just on that purpose of showing the board. It's
For sure,
not something
I'm
that,
sure they do.
you know
Yeah,
what I mean.
100%.
And then obviously our perception would be that, oh, of course Teja won one. No, it probably was sent to Teja because
Yeah.
of the marketing that
Yeah.
and Teja, because obviously
He's
we know that
sponsored
it's
by
the biggest.
Geekhold, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean,
Correct.
it makes
He is,
sense.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
so
Makes sense.
I wouldn't doubt that these manufacturers also, although they have these raffles, but obviously on their production they're going to have 1, 2, 10 units that they have ready for that for that event.
Yeah,
It happens
that's
everywhere. It
just
happens on mobile
business.
phones.
Yeah,
That's just business.
just
They
business.
just give you the mobile phones to test. Obviously, Apple does it. So, it's a good business practice. So, and maybe that also then gives us the perception that, oh yes, of course these guys are always having the best. No, it's also because of that. It's not just preferential treatment. It's just a business negotiation.
Yeah.
It's just business, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't doubt that, on a raffle, obviously, that they're not going to change the numbers so that vendors get preferential treatment. Obviously, right? Like you said, Jay, that you had to buy a commission one because you couldn't get a
Yeah,
raffle.
I entered. I still enter Keycult raffles every time I see them and I have chance to enter them. I still enter them. and I still only have two key cults. I have one that I bought aftermarket, which I paid through the nose for, and I have one that I commissioned, and that's it. I've never won a single key cult raffle.
Yeah. Dotnik MK subs a tier 1 for 8 months. Thank you so much. He says bada bing, bada boom, which I have no idea what that's in
Bada
reference
bing,
to,
bada
but
boom.
I
I'm
appreciate
not
that,
sure.
my friend.
Isn't
It's a
it
nice phrase, though.
from Bada Bing Bada Boom? Isn't it? No, it's not from. I was
It's
Is it
thinking.
it's
Soprano?
it's from a lot of things. I don't
Yeah,
know what he's referencing here. Is what
correct.
I mean.
Yeah.
Which is totally fine. Totally fine. Yeah. Anyways, now that we've ranted kind of off topic for a bit, do
Yes, we
we
did.
have any closing thoughts about our discussion today about customs? Because I feel like not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but obviously we have a couple differing opinions on it, and we haven't really came to anything truly conclusive. I would say. Again, not that we need to, not that this was intended to. I think everyone needs to maybe draw their own conclusions. But any closing thoughts
Sure.
on the custom topic?
Yeah, so I've got two thoughts. One is I am now less sure about what is a custom than I was when we
I
started
am
this
too.
stream, and I'm also less
Indeed.
sure about what an OEM is than when we first started this stream.
Yes.
And I'm
Yes.
really questioning some of my long-held beliefs around what both of those were because now I really don't know.
I feel like I'm in the same boat. I feel like I kind of thought what I was always right because I just always think I'm right because I'm just that kind of terrible person. But
Yeah,
now I'm starting to second guess myself a little
I
bit.
think
yeah,
I think that was probably the goal of this episode was to bring more questions and answers. But yeah, I think I exactly the same. I think that we didn't answer anything. We just thought about it and came out with more questions than we had.
Yeah,
And I love this comment from Clockwork, which says, I think the farthest you can go from being custom for a keyboard is probably replacing keycaps and putting O rings. And then if anyone is still dumb enough to do that anymore. And to be
a
honest,
little
I've
bit, a
tried
little
it when
bit.
I started,
yep.
and it's
2014, I
such
remember
a
doing it.
yes, and it's
Yeah,
such
I
a
get
bad
requests every week to
experience.
stock them on the store. I get requests every week to stock them on the store. I
I
don't,
It's
but I do
such
get
a bad
asked every week
I
to do
did
experience.
it.
it once and I'll never do it again. I immediately took them off. It was terrible.
Exactly the same thing,
Um,
Brian. For me, was you spent I don't know how long just putting little
yep,
plastic things on
yep.
switches. You put your keycaps on, you try typing, you go like, oh, and you just take it out
You feel
again
like you're
immediately.
typing on wet newspaper. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Indeed, indeed.
It's terrible. Well, I mean, I guess we can just for the sake of it. I know we haven't really come to a conclusion, but maybe each of us can just give maybe a one sentence answer on what we personally as individuals think a custom is. How about that? Does that work for you guys?
That works for me.
Oh, sure.
And as I ask that, of course, I'm not even fully prepared for this, so I'm still thinking of what
You have
my
to go
one
first, Brian. It was
sentence.
your suggestion. So
It's only
you
you're
have to
right.
go first.
It's only fair that I go first. So let me try to bullshit my way through this. So I think a custom is a keyboard that requires. I'm gonna go loose on this one. I think anything that requires any amount of assembly or configuration, or that you have a personal say in the end game typing experience. I'll go out to even as far as to say that swapping your keycaps can constitute a custom keyboard if it actually changes the experience. Like, and I'll give you an example. You have OEM keyboards on your Filco. You swap that out for SA profile. SA profile, very different from OEM, right?
Oh,
I
I
think
agree. It's very different.
I would still say it's an OEM keyboard, but it has been customized. An OEM that's been customized. And I feel like that's kind of where it'll start for me. But something, I'll try to give a more concrete example. Something I'm typing on right now, the GMMK Pro, something like the M60A behind me that have hot swap PCBs, but you put your own switches and keycaps on. That's a custom to me because you can custom make it to your own specifications. More or less, especially in the instance of the GMMK Pro, which offers multiple plate materials as well.
Sure. Okay, makes sense. Vogan, what's your one phrase on what a custom keyboard is?
I would say that custom is something that you have modified yourself. But again, I wouldn't agree that it's just keycaps, but something that you took the time to make it your own, as in definitely completely different from something else that is on the market. I don't consider the custom to just be something that you just put keycaps that come that anyone can have on a same board. Something really, really different from anything that you might find, just like this, and just because someone asked for to see it, right? The Nuka Cola board. I think that
You could call it.
again, it's a Magic Force 68, but this one there's the only one in the world. So I would say that this is, even though it's a Magic Force OEM board, and it is, with different switches, etc. This is a custom board because of that, because it's completely different and there's none available. So I wouldn't categorize something as custom just because it changed keycaps. But at the same time, if the keycaps you made them there yourself, and they're the only ones in the world, maybe that's actually a custom. But again, it's such a loaded topic that we've come up with that is so hard to talk
Is-
about.
Yeah, and just
Sure.
because
So
you
It's
said
like-
that,
to put a definition on that, right?
just because you said that, I want to bring up.
You're just fine. You're not changing yours. You're not changing yours.
I'm not
right?
changing mine. I'm going to point out something in
Change it.
chat. I'm not changing
Right.
mine. I'm playing loose with the definition, and I'm okay with it.
Well, when it comes down to my tip, I'm going to be quite specific. I think I'm going
Okay.
to risk it and be quite specific. But anyway, go on. You're going to pick up something from chat.
Yeah, I never know how to say this name. To Tick is saying, after this chat, I now classify the GMMK as both as an OEM custom and as a custom OEM. And to be honest, I feel like that's totally fine. I don't think we need to necessarily say that this keyboard X is a custom, keyboard X is an OEM. It's one way or the other. Obviously, we've talked about the differences a little bit between maybe what is a custom and what is customizing. And just like with my answer, if you swap out keycaps on your OEM Filco, to me that is still customizing the board. The board is no longer fully OEM, right? It's a customized OEM board, and I feel like you can have kind of intersecting terminology there, as long as people know what you're talking about.
Sure. Okay.
And sorry to interrupt you again, Jay, but also Clockwork
No, go for
said, "Isn't that just modding?" And I feel like earlier on in the stream we've kind of decided that modding and customizing are kind of the same thing.
And customizing are the same thing. Yeah. Okay, so for mine, I'm going to split mine into 3 parts, and I'm going to say that there is 3 elements I need to address, but I'm going to be quite specific in each one. So I imagine that I'm going to get a ton of DMs saying you are absolutely 100% wrong, Jay. Why are you in this hobby? All of that kind of thing. But I'm going to risk it and say, here we go. I think a bespoke keyboard is something that is made for just one person, irrespective of anything else. When we talked about the word bespoke, I think a bespoke keyboard is for one individual only, and only that individual, and it's been customized in some sort of way to make it just for that one person. I think a custom keyboard, as we call it in the hobby, is a board that is, once it's delivered, it is either has the ability to be amended by the end user without breaking any warranty or terms and conditions, or it comes assembled and you can still disassemble it still without breaking those terms and conditions. And I think a customized keyboard is an OEM keyboard that has been modified by the end user that owns it. And I don't class keycap changing as a modification. It has to be more intrinsic than just swapping keycaps.
But you never.
Those are the 3 really specifics I'm going to go into.
What about hot swaps, though? I don't think you ever made a decision on if hot swap switches are more invasive than swapping keycaps, considering it's just plug and play as keycaps are.
So I have an answer for this now that I didn't have before. I think if you are going from a stock switch to a stock switch in a hot swap keyboard, that's not customizing. If you're going from and by stock switch, I'm saying that that was intended to be used with that board. So if it's an OEM board, whatever the standard OEM manufacturer is, usually Cherry or whatever, going from a Cherry MX Blue to Cherry MX Brown, that's not customizing unless you take the switch apart and lube it, or you replace it with a third-party switch from another vendor entirely. For a hot swap to be customized, you have to either take the switch apart, lube it, or use a lubed switch, or you have to use switches that are entirely removed from what that original keyboard used to have.
Okay, so let me give you an example then. A hot swap OEM
All of
board.
them
A hot swap OEM board that ships with Cherry MX Reds. You take the Cherry MX Reds out and you replace them with Cherry MX Greens, a switch that's not even offered with this keyboard. That's still OEM in your definition, right?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you take the Cherry MX Reds out and you replace them with Gateron Yellows, it's now a custom. It's no longer OEM.
Nope. For me, it's still OEM. But
I think, yeah, I
if
think
you
you're
take
making
that,
a conscious decision to move away from the original one. I think that is
no, you know what?
customizing. Yeah.
Well, I don't know, because then, okay, so then if we take those greens and we open them and we loop them, would then that make them custom, even though they're cherry greens?
Yeah, they're customized switches at that point. So yes,
Okay.
I
So
agree that
yeah,
that's customizing.
The
so it's not really just the
Well, that
brand.
makes
Because,
Okay,
the
okay,
switches
okay, you're right,
customized.
Vogan.
Is
You're
the
right,
board a
Vogan. Yeah, it
custom?
makes the switches customized.
yeah,
Is the
yeah,
board
you know,
itself
Yeah. Okay.
custom now that it has loop
again,
switches that weren't offered from the retailers?
Okay. So flip
big
point here.
minefield again,
An
right?
OEM board can be customized. An OEM board can be customized, but it can't ever be a custom. But it can be bespoke because you've changed something to make it just yours.
You
Like
know what?
your magic source
Okay.
is bespoke.
Okay.
I will completely agree with those like two sentences you just said. I think that sums it up very nicely. OEM boards will always be an OEM board at heart, but it can be customized, and depending on what you do to it to tailor make it just to you, can absolutely be bespoke.
Agree.
Bespoke, like Jay mentioned, which I fully agree. Bespoke,
and Magic Force is a bespoke board, right?
yeah.
Because it's just the only one that exists.
Exactly.
If you
I would
make
say,
it
yeah, I
entirely
would
to your
agree with
specifications,
that sentence. Yeah, it's a bespoke board. There's only one made. Again, and you could discuss. Then you could bring it up if is bespoke made for you or made by you. Same thing. It's just something that just one exists and is proper to that. So I agree. It's more bespoke than actually custom. Probably that would be more of a term.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, there's no R bespoke keyboards. Maybe we need to create one.
man, this has been such a hard topic to follow. I feel like
Yes.
I can't imagine how confused so many people in chat must be.
If you spill enough juice on them, right? All keyboards are custom if you spill enough juice on them.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Indeed.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
That's the end of the show.
with that said, I think now's probably a good time to kind of roll over to our Q&A segment. We're going to talk about our sponsors for just a moment before we start getting into the questions. But please, 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 if you have questions, get them in now, whether they pertain to keyboards or not, whether they pertain to the topic, customs, that we've been talking about today or not. Let us know and tag us. And if you have questions specific for Vogon, which I really hope you do, make sure you tag him along with us as well, so we can pick the questions out from chat. And that helped us out a lot. Yeah. All right, guys. So starting out with the one, the only novel keys. You guys probably already know them. You guys probably already love them. And if you don't, you probably should. Anyways, numerous things going on right now, including GMK Parcel. If you're a fan of the kind of courier service aesthetic, then GMK Parcel could be totally up your alley. Several GMK sets going on right now, actually. Honderbait 2, not really a set for me, but hey, a lot of people do definitely like it. And this iteration does come with a more dark kind of base kit as well, which I thought was pretty awesome. Like that option. So if you missed out on it last time, there you go. GMK Zooted, if you like to partake in the devil's lettuce, as it were. GMK Zooted could be for you, or maybe you just like the colorway. I like it quite a bit. NK65s, like we've been talking about a couple times on the show today, the aluminum version for the V2, they are in stock. They're a little bit more expensive than the pre-order was, but still a pretty relatively good value considering the specs that you get. And lots of other things going on, of course, as usual. They have springs, switches, keycaps, desk mats, a little something for everyone. And if you're buying in stock, please make sure you use the promo code ClickClack, one word, no caps, and I'll get you 5% off all your in-stock goodies.
Absolutely. Moving over to our second sponsor of the night, it is the wonderful people over at Kono.store. Now, they have a few different things going on at the moment, including SA Espresso, which I believe is in its last day or just about to go into its last day. So if you want to pick up a really nice coffee-looking themed set that's kind of a bit of a gradient set, but on the horizontal level instead of on the vertical level, then that might be something that interests you. As well as that, they also have MG Fishing up as well, which is MG profile keycaps, which is something I'm kind of keen to try. I haven't tried them as yet, so I might be picking up a set of this if that interests you as well. Some interesting color choices there too. And finally, if you want to go back to old reliable, they do have a GMK Moai available at the minute as well. So you could pick up GMK Moai in group buy, which has some really nice color options too. Finally, the big thing to call out on Kono this week is that they actually have a community survey running,
Yeah.
which also has a giveaway attached to it as well. So if you're interested in providing feedback as part of a community survey, I'll drop a link in chat. You can go ahead and you can go fill that out, and then they've got a giveaway for a GMK copper as well.
Yeah, so I think I totally forgot to tell you about this, Jay, but Andrew reached out to me the other day and he was asking if I could share this around as well. I always like these. These are something I'm always a big fan of because they kind of show you how people kind of feel about certain things in the community. So this is a fairly basic keyboard survey. You've probably seen these before if you've been around for a while. There have been several run by all sorts of different people in the community. Talks about your favorite switch type, your favorite switches, your favorite layouts, your favorites this and that, and it's almost like a community census in a way of preference, which I think is pretty awesome. So favorite keycap profiles, etc. So it's pretty straightforward. And if you want to fill it out, cool. If you don't, totally fine. Like Jay mentioned, they do have a giveaway that's kind of running alongside it, which Jay also linked in chat there. So you can feel free to check that out and go win a set of GMK copper, hopefully. So yeah, definitely do that. I'm gonna go ahead and fill that out right after the stream as well because I like these kind of things. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to analytics and statistics and stuff like that. So definitely feel free to do that if you're interested. Moving on over to KBD fans, they have numerous things going on right now. Lots and lots and lots of key sets going on right now, both in GMK and Enjoy PBT. Enjoy PBT 6085 being the one that kind of has my eye right now, considering it's based off of a board that's very kind of near and dear to my heart. My very first Alps board, the Xerox DocuTech. So love seeing that. Lots of entry-level keyboard kits available as well. And they're actually running a customer appreciation event right now. So as you can see on your screen here, you can kind of pick up some of these coupons. They are limited, but there are quite a few of them, honestly. You can pick up some of these coupons and use them and hopefully get some nice discounts going on there. So yeah, feel free to check that out.
Oh, and our final sponsor of the day, it is the wonderful Leandrin over at Mechanisk. Nothing for sale on the site at the moment, but I just want to shout out that Leandrin's had a massive, massive early part of this year with a huge pre-order, his largest ever, and he's still catching up after the fact. So he's still trying to get back on his feet as well, getting all of the store fully opened and ready. The physical store location that he has in Oslo, he's getting all of that ready to open. So the store will be opening back up shortly, at which point you'll be able to buy lots and lots of cool in-stock Mechanisk goodies. So keep an eye out for that coming as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're ever going to Oslo, make sure you check into that shop because man, I bet that's going to be awesome. I've seen some of the early pictures; it's looking pretty nice. All right, guys. Well, back to the Q&A. If you guys have questions, please feel free to ask them before we head out and raid another streamer. Muzu Rides, kind of continuing on with our theme here, saying, I think any changes or modifications to OEM keyboards are customized keyboards, even if you're changing from MX Reds to Browns. Yeah, I agree with that. I think once you start swapping things, it's still a customization, right? Even if it's not a custom keyboard product, and that's kind of the conclusion I came to as well. OEM keyboards can be customized, but it doesn't necessarily make them a custom.
Right.
You can have an OEM with a custom PCB or with custom firmware, custom, keycaps, for example, potentially.
Yeah, I think we agree on the term of customized versus custom.
Yeah.
Maybe that's probably
Sure.
what we take from this episode is that difference between customized keyboard versus custom keyboard and the meaning of both. Maybe that's one thing that
Exactly.
we start looking
Yeah,
at.
yeah. The meaning of custom in the keyboard lexicon has a very
Correct.
different meaning to in real life, and we
Yes.
need to separate that from the word customized, which is a very different meaning in the hobby, which does apply to real life customization as well. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, we use custom as such a blanket term, right? Like,
sure.
we throw around
Yeah.
the term custom so often, custom keyboard, but we don't really think about whether that means customized keyboard, custom made keyboard, custom
Yeah.
this or that keyboard.
It's going back to the same discussion that I had, the same thing that I said before. It's the same thing as designer in English, which is an all-encompassing word that can mean so much, so
That's
many different things,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
that's
so
another conversation we need to have,
Well,
right?
we
it's
have
so
actually. It was an episode
yeah.
you had to miss, unfortunately,
Oh
Jay. Remember,
yeah, yeah. I
I
forgot
had
about that. Yeah,
P Wade and Nathan Alphaman on, and we had an awesome discussion on kind of what is and what is not a designer, and I thought that was pretty fun as well. Yeah. Okay. People are saying GMK beans. Did I miss something? GMK beans when? I don't know what GMK beans is.
Beans, obviously. GMK Beans is
Oh,
the best
of course,
set
GMK
that
beans.
there
Yes,
is.
naturally.
GMK Beans. Come
All
on,
right, fair enough.
typical. It's
Fair-
something that
I feel like I missed something there. I don't know. Arcana is asking, will the glass green keyboard stands be back in stock? I was thinking of picking one up and it was out of stock. I'm not sure which ones you're referring to.
I think he means the ones on my site. Yes,
Oh,
that
okay.
will be the stock color. It's the colored ones that will change Arcana. So yeah, I'll have the glass keyboard stands back in stock in a couple of weeks' time.
Nice. Shred Major is asking, if you just found out about custom keyboards right now and you saw the severe supply demand issue going on, how would you react? Oh, man.
Send death threats to every vendor.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's a
I would
really
just
bad joke.
I
That's
would
a really
just
bad joke.
call them all the names that they're. I would
Yeah,
just
I mean,
destroy.
obviously, I think we can all agree that
Obviously.
if any vendor cannot get you the product that you want immediately for free, they're a terrible
Their
vendor.
store needs to end. It's
Yeah,
simple.
yes,
Yeah.
they.
The store needs to disappear from the earth. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
I cannot buy something on the keyboard hobby. It's
there's,
not available.
there's
Are you
there's
joking
no
with
other
me?
solution.
It's unacceptable, sir. This is unacceptable, sir.
Yeah,
Okay?
sir. But you got, yeah,
I
you have to
love
be
that.
really condescending about it. Um, anyways, not a bad question though, gentlemen. How do we feel about that? How would we react to seeing the supply demand issue going on if we're brand new to custom keyboards?
Do you know what? I think it's difficult for me because I joined this hobby when a time when there was nothing in stock ever, and it was all just group buys, and that was kind
Yeah,
of understood from the outset. I think now it's very much different. If you come into the hobby now, you see loads of vendors, and basically everything on their site is out of stock apart from a few bits and pieces. Like the vast majority of stuff just says out of stock. Um, so I think it's really difficult, and I think if I came into it now, I'd be very frustrated with that, and I'd probably drop out of the hobby faster. Um, because I wouldn't appreciate that whole waiting time and that process that all of the projects go through. And that's just because of how big the hobby is now compared to how it was in the end. When I joined in 2014 or whenever it was, you had like two vendors at the time worldwide. There was like next to no one doing it. And you had a few people who were doing it from their basements or from their spare bedrooms or whatever. And I think that's changed. So I think right now I'd probably get very frustrated very quickly, and I understand why people might be frustrated at the moment with the state of the hobby. And I probably wouldn't have hung around as much as I did. I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't have stayed in the hobby as long.
I I have a different opinion on that. But again, maybe because again, not I don't want to pull the age thing, but again, also the age makes you think a bit differently. But it's true that I started about what 2018, right? And it's one of the things that I learned was patience on the hobby. Again, you come from the OEM world, you come from the Amazons of the world. You buy it now, get it now, right? And for me, originally was a bit of a mental step to think that I'm parting away with all this money and I need to wait 8 months. It's not normal. When you buy. So I think that the hobby also learned me, gave me that mentality of waiting, and it's okay to wait. It wouldn't take me out of the hobby, but again, I feel that there's so much, and this is a very loaded thing I'm going to say, but there's so many available things which are not original China things that I would probably then go to those instead of going to the actual vendors. You know what I mean? In terms of nowadays, because I can, because there's I have financial possibilities for that, but I think that I would probably gravitate much more to that than to the actual, to looking at, and I speak about today. Today I look at certain key sets and I love them, and I look at it and go like, fulfillment quarter 4 of 2022, and I go like, no, I'm not gonna wait
yeah.
that long, right? And that pulls me away from it. Some of them I still go because I really enjoy either the theme or I enjoy the person doing it and I want to support them. But nowadays I'm much more into that thing of a theme or someone that or a cause that I want to support. Then that's more of it. But I wouldn't. It wouldn't pull me away from it. And at the same time, there's so much more available now. Obviously, going into the mental state of thinking that it needs to be here for me now. Not really. That's why I think that boards like GMMK are going to succeed because of that, because they're available, they're there, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I guess if I were new to the community and I saw the supply and demand going on right now, I gotta be honest. I think I agree with you guys. I'd be pretty frustrated. I think it would definitely be, and we've talked about this before. It's just one of the major barrier of entries kind of coming into the hobby, that a lot of people just kind of have to deal with. It all comes back, I think, to how open minded you are when you're coming into the hobby. When you come into the keyboard hobby, you have to realize like this isn't a mainstream thing yet, right? Like we're not on the same level as a lot of other hobbies. When you come in here, you have to realize that a lot of your vendors are just people like you, that are just trying to like get things done and do something for the community, and like you don't have the resources to do mass production and get everything super quick. That's just like not how it goes. And obviously, we've been in the hobby for a while now, so we're kind of used to this. When I see stuff sold out, or when I see 1 year lead times, I'm like, okay, whatever. It's just another day in the keyboard hobby. But if you are brand new to it, it seems asinine, right? You're so used to just being able to buy something and getting it instantly, and having the quality good. Otherwise, you return it and get a refund. And the keyboard hobby is just a lot more complicated than that. Whether it's fortunate or unfortunate. But that's just how our hobby is. We're small and we're amidst a pretty big growth phase, and I feel like a lot of people are still trying to adapt. And when I say a lot of people, I mean like vendors and retailers, group by runners, artisan makers, etc. But they're kind of at the ground floor of trying to adapt to this growth, and some are struggling with it more than others. And it's everyone. And like you said before, Jay, I know like most vendors like are just trying to do good, right? They want to get
Yeah.
you the product, and they want you to be happy with the product, but a lot of these one man, two man operations aren't really big enough to get thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of units out, of everything they do, and that's just the reality of it. So the more patience you have, I think, before coming into the hobby, I think the better off you're going to be in the hobby, just realizing and kind of empathizing with a lot of the other people in the hobby and a lot of your vendors and retailers that it's just kind of the way the hobby is right now, and there's nothing that you can really do to change that. And it'll probably change moving forward, I'm sure, naturally, as people get bigger and vendors hire more people and they start to get more experienced and accustomed to doing these large scale runs. I think until that happens, it kind of just is the way it
That's
is.
the
And
trick. That's the trick. I think scalability of vendors isn't as fast as the hobby needs it to be,
Yeah,
and I think that's
yeah,
the challenge. And I can 100% attest to this as a vendor. It is not easy to scale fast and still keep control of quality at the level you want it to be at. Like it is very, very difficult to keep an eye on quality control and scale to that kind of level that the hobby is currently demanding. You can absolutely scale really fast if you want to just chuck more people at it, but in doing so, you reduce the level of quality of product that you end up putting out because people just don't know, and it takes time to teach people. And
yeah,
the vast majority of people in this hobby are we're quite disparate and spread around, especially here in Europe, for example. In my town where I live, there's probably 5 people into mechanical keyboards. Are those the 5 people that I'd want to employ to grow my brand, or would it be better to be someone else? And if they're remote, how does that then work with the warehouse? And it's difficult to get the right people in the right roles because it is a small niche hobby, and people need the knowledge and the passion for it to be able to produce good
yeah,
products. And just hiring anyone doesn't necessarily give you that passion, and it doesn't necessarily give you the right quality control to scale up as well. So that's the challenge, I think, really.
now
yeah,
on note, right? And I always like to bring the analogy to cars, right? And to think about OEM cars, and then the Lamborghinis, Ferraris, McLarens of the world, right? Not saying that every custom board that you buy, again, custom, there we go again, but that any board like that you buy is a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or whatever. But at the same time, if we think about they are compared to a Fiat, and if we could say that an OEM, is a regular Opel, Vauxhall, Fiat, Citroen type of board, and then you have more advanced boards. And even Mercedes, yes, they have OEM, but you don't see McLaren's, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren's, Ferraris, Lamborghinis being OEM. You need to go to them. You need to, again, a lot of them, like certain Ferraris, you cannot buy them even if you want. Even if you have the money and you go to Ferrari, and you say, I want this car, they're not going to sell it to you. And you have to wait because they're made by hand and they'll take time. So is this, and again, picking up on Curious Yellow comment here saying vendors selling a product as premium with a sub premium buying experience. What is that buying experience, the sub premium buying experience that you mean? Is it waiting, or is it, not getting?
Yeah,
No,
you're 100% right, Vaughan. You are, because you're right. If you wanted to be able to buy the latest Ferrari, you have to be invited to buy it for a start off.
correct.
And then when you do buy it, you're linked into a 6 to 12 month delivery program before you get the car. And some cars you aren't even allowed to keep at your house if you're buying a top end Ferrari. Some cars they will keep for you, they will look after, and they will take it to a track of your choice in the world when you book the track to race it and drive the car. So it is very different. But I appreciate what Curious Yellow is saying, that they're selling the products as premium. I agree. We sell premium keyboards across most of the vendors. That's a fair way of putting it. Um, Buying experience, I think that's an internal definition you need to have. I don't think group buys themselves are necessarily a negative experience. The waiting and anticipation is 100% the part of any bespoke product. So it should be the same for premium stuff as well, to an extent. If you mean the way that you buy on stores is that it's first come first served or something else, that's an entirely different thing. I'm not sure I'm sold on first come first serve is better than raffles, and I'm not sure I'm sold on raffles is better than first come first serve, because everyone, either way, it still ends up with someone disappointed. Victory auctions have their own kind of pros and cons, so it's very, very difficult to say. What I will say is your second point, saying you'll need to bump prices to get the level of buying experience people expect, is no. I think what I'm saying is that to scale as fast as the community would like to handle demand, vendors need to scale very cleverly, not quickly. There's two very distinct things. Scaling quickly is easy and not particularly expensive. You can just hire, 10 people on minimum wage and get them in the workshop and start packing in orders. But that will lead to a drop in quality control. So that's one thing you have to bear in mind. Whereas if you wait and grow slower, you'll get the right people into the roles and you'll be able to train them up to do the right things and take the right care. So you'll still maintain that quality control level, but it will take you slower and a lot more long-term growth in terms of the actual size of the company, the capability of the company. So those are two very, very different things.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people need to realize is even the more established vendors in our communities are very much still startup businesses in like the grand scheme of things. And like not all these vendors have everything figured out, right? And some of them they don't
Yeah.
have a ton of employees. So like you mentioned, it's like you got to balance this, right? You can't grow too fast, otherwise some things will suffer. But at the end of the day, you also a lot of these vendors they need to cover their overhead as well. And if that means something being a little bit more expensive, then that's just the way it is. But the flip side of this is once everyone kind of does get their their foot on the ground and they start to figure out how everything needs to be working and everything's like a smooth buying experience, and you have these people that are willing to work for you and they're trained and they're you're getting the quality up, then you can start to crank out much higher MOQs, and because of that the price will start to drop on a lot of these products at the same time. So well, you do need to be able to cover your overhead, but when you have all the cogs working at the same time, I feel like you're able to pump out products that'll actually be like a much better price overall, because you won't have to account for much lower MOQs and the hours upon hours upon hours that one or two people have to do to sort these boards, the manpower.
Yeah, like a high-end keyboard. Like I know from example for the JO ones, when they arrive, and they should arrive in my workshop next month, 500 or so boards. I can't remember the exact number. Each one of those boards will take me an hour to quality control, check, and pack. That's 500 hours of work, which is a long time. When you think about it, that's a lot of time and a lot of hours. But each one, you've got to unpack the board, you've got to check it over for physical deformations, you've got to make sure the right screws are in there, you've got to make sure that the threads are fine, you've got to make sure that the threads are clean, you've got to check that the plate fits in correctly, that you've got the right plate for the order, you've got to check that the PCB is correct and working and making sure that's all good, you've got to check that you've got the right PCB for the order, whether it's hot swap or solder, you've got to make sure you've got all of the right extras in there, you've got to fold a cardboard box up, you've got to tape the box up, you've got to make sure that the carry case is put in the cardboard box and it's all safe and secure and everything's taped down and secure. That process end to end. I have a whole range of tables. I have 6 tables laid out, and it's a process end to end. It's like a conveyor belt, and that takes about an hour for each keyboard to pass through. And when you think about that, it's a lot of time, and more hands doesn't necessarily make that faster, and the wrong hands would make it slower. So scaling is very difficult about that. You have to have the right people in the right roles.
Yeah, you can't come into this hobby. The reality is, you can't just come into this hobby and expect your buying experiences to be like Amazon, right? Because Amazon has infinitely more resources than
Yeah.
novelties or
And even
prototypists
Amazon
or
can sell you.
Hmm.
And even Amazon, it happened to me. You buy something and then you get like a shower curtain without,
yeah.
you're like, how?
Yeah, you get the wrong product,
You
right?
know,
Yeah.
so even Amazon can fail,
Yeah.
right? So,
Well, Amazon
Yeah.
has other
yeah.
problems, but you know.
But again, one of the things I wanted to pick up with Curious Yellow, he says like waiting lack of assurance that what you're getting is what you're going to get, color inaccuracies, awful no communication about progress, setbacks. Generally, vendors shrug when you say, why are things delayed, and you're expected to just swallow it as a customer. Now, I see it in two ways. One of them is that in certain things like key sets, as an example, vendors don't really have much say on it. That's my point of view. You know, it's not like a vendor can go to GMK and say, "Why are you delayed?" GMK is going to tell the vendor, "You know what? It's delayed." And
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes,
they're just.
we can
I'll be
agree.
honest. I can
You
give you an
know,
example of this. I've done this, folk, and I've gone to GMK and I've said, look, we had this key set. You said it was going to ship in January. It's now February. Where's the key set? And they just give you a revised timeline. Like that's the nature of these products. They say, sorry, production hasn't completed yet,
too
but this
bad.
is now the new
No,
date we're targeting.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Now we can advocate it. Yes, maybe the vendor, depending on vendors, but maybe the vendor should inform you know the customers that we had this information. It is delayed. This is the new expected time. In certain things, I think that vendors can actually sort of try to compromise themselves into providing that detail, like you were saying, Jay, in your own group buy. You probably can try and make that date work, right? In
yeah.
others, you're just dependent on other vendors, right? And so
Sure,
at a certain point, one of the things that I find that is good today compared to before is that today you want a key set, you're going to a vendor, you're going to a company that you can actually get money back if something doesn't happen. Before, you would putting money on
Yeah.
someone's hand,
Blindly putting
yeah,
into one
and
individual
you
for a
you
group
know
buy and
and you
hope
didn't
that they
don't
follow
know,
through.
and you didn't have any guarantees then, because obviously it would be different because you're just putting money on someone's account. And nowadays, no,
sure,
nowadays you're putting the money on a business, on an actual store that has legal, there's legal implications if they fail to comply, because then you can actually complain, and you can actually get your money back. So
sure.
at least on that sense, we're actually a bit better than we were before.
Yeah.
It is not perfect at all. Not perfect at all. Obviously, we would like to have more assurances and things, and and to have a business that actually works better for us. But this is, again, going back. This is what it is to want to have this type of products, which are very limited for the amount, and more are very limited. Even though if they sell, we're talking about certain ski sets that sell what, 5,000. We have how many thousands in the MKU? Obviously not the real hobby size, but and our mechanical keyboards, we have what, 800K now or something like that,
Somewhere in that region, yeah,
Yeah.
nearly a million people, yeah,
right? And we're selling 5,000 key sets for 800,000 people. So you know, obviously that it's still a very, very small niche, and it's
Yeah.
still obviously is going to, you know,
it
we're not
is.
GMK. We're not a volume for GMK. GMK doesn't, it's a spec for them. Yes, it's a part of their business, but still, it's not their business. It's not their core business. And people are saying, "Oh, should we do lesser key sets?" GMK just wants to make them. GMK would be willing to accept if GMK. That's my opinion, but if GMK would get now 500 orders of 500 different key sets on the same month, they will go like, "Okay, sure, we'll do it."
Would they turn the business away? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's an
Yes, it's
interesting
going
one,
to
and
take us 10 years, but we'll do it. Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
yeah,
still in their queue. Yeah. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't affect them at all. Yeah.
for sure, for sure. Why would you turn away money, right?
Yeah.
From a
It's
business perspective, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and it's really kind of rough because I feel like vendors tend to be held at the mercy of manufacturers, and even in that scenario, the vendors are usually the ones that have to publicly take all the blame for it,
Yeah.
and it's
Sure,
kind of
I don't want to
unfortunate
shy away from
because
that. Like my view is I don't want to shy away from that, and I provide. I don't know if you guys have ever looked, but on my site I provide an update every weekend. Every Friday or Saturday, I post an update for every single group I've got that's outstanding, and it says this is when it's expected to deliver. One week of that might say it's expected to deliver in June. The next week that might say it's expected to deliver in July because I've got new information. So I update that every single week, and I post that every week. But that's a lot of overhead. That takes me a lot of time to do. It's literally a 6 hour job every Friday or Saturday to go through every single one, check the latest updates from each manufacturer, make sure I've got the right dates on there, make sure I'm typing the right information in there, putting new group buys on, taking ones out that have shipped and delivered to customers. It's a massive overhead, and I struggle to get it done every week. I'll be honest, but. And I can see why some of the bigger vendors just couldn't do that. Novel Keys just wouldn't be able to do that. That would be a full-time job for someone to do to provide updates. So it's not scalable to do that as an overall, and that's why I think sites like Keycaplander are amazing because they show roughly what group buys have shipped, they show which ones are due, they show roughly when they're expected to be shipping and all of that kind of stuff, and it takes the onus away from the. It provides a centralized position for viewing updates on group buys for keycaps at the very least, if not other products as well. But a lot of the buck does stop with the vendors, and that's quite right. We're the ones that take the money, therefore we should be the ones on the spike. We should be the ones getting the updates from the manufacturers, making sure customers are aware, and helping customers who are unhappy. And I will absolutely hold my hand up and say that I will do that if anyone's got a problem with it. I'll offer email me if anyone's got any questions. I'll hold my hand up and support them. I think any vendor would do the same. None of the vendors are out here to try and do the hobby harm or to make the people in the hobby feel uncomfortable or anything like that. We all want what's best for the hobby. There isn't a vendor out there that I know that wants negative things to happen for the hobby. They always want to do what's in the best interest for the hobby.
yeah. Kind of moving along here because we're getting up there in time. Funmaster is asking, are we at our maximum when it comes to key set group buys? Will we need to set a limit of sets per month presently or in the future? That's an interesting question. I feel like,
Yeah.
oh man, I feel like as long as we have so many vendors in the hobby and we have so many emerging that I feel like it's going to be hard to limit the amount of key sets. I think the queue will effectively just keep getting longer and longer unless GMK, can put some resources into faster manufacturing, whether that be even more machines or more staff or what have you.
Sure.
I think until
Think yeah.
as long
Yeah.
as GMK's queue keeps extending, we'll probably see a little bit of a drop in GMK at least, just because I think there's a threshold, right, where everyone I feel like doesn't feel like waiting that long, and that could be a year for some people, a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Like, would you? I know Vogon, you mentioned earlier, like you saw
Oh
some
yeah.
some of the dates, and you're just like, no, I don't want to. I don't know,
Mm.
that's too far away. And I've had the situation
Yeah.
even years ago where I've waited a year for a product, and then by the time I got it, I didn't want the product anymore. Opinions change, your feelings change, and it's hard to know exactly how you'll feel a year later after you order it, or 2 years later after you order it. And I feel like uh, that starts to become the case more and more once we kind of cross that year threshold. Once people realize they have to
Sure.
wait, a year or 2 years for a product, they really start to reconsider whether it's worth it or not. And
Yeah.
I feel
100%
like
agree.
yeah, and I feel like because of that, and we saw the same thing happen with SA, right? Once the SA used to be dominant, way more dominant than GMK when it comes to like custom key sets, from the community designs, and SA got to the point where it was like a year and 2 months or a year and 4 months for the queue, and people were just like, nah, nah. And then that's when GMK started exploding, and we started seeing so many fewer SA sets because Signature Plastics just wasn't getting used nearly as much because we wanted to take time to let the queue catch up because people didn't want to wait a year and a half for a key set.
Yeah, but it's still a long timescale for SA keycaps, right?
Yeah.
Even now, but you're right, and I think people will vote with the wallets, and what people buy will determine what the vendors sell. Ultimately, if GMK keycaps stop selling as well, but other products start to sell better, then the vendors will move on to other products, and so will designers. They'll realize that, and they'll change with it. I think it's an interesting one to watch and see how it pans out. All of the vendors I know want to do less group buys and more in stock. That's a fact. but it's hard to transition from one to the other when the lead time for any product you want to stock is longer than the group buy time scales. Because it's a smaller order, it gets less priority. It's going to take longer to produce. But it's just a transition period we're in, and it's going to be like that for a while. We're not going to see the end of group buys for at least a few years yet, but we'll see more and more in stock products come and happen. So we just need to wait and see how it goes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
Uh, Curious Yellow with an interesting question. Couldn't you turn that QC process into a checklist so an unskilled person can do it? I've
Okay, so for personal experience, I've tried this. I've tried and got someone who is not in the hobby to complete a checklist to my specifications. This was my brother, by the way. He won't watch, so I can say this about him. And his level of QC compared to mine was not acceptable. After 3 days of showing him what was acceptable and what was not acceptable, he still couldn't get it, and he quit in frustration and left, and he hasn't been back to my workshop since. So no, I don't
I
think you can turn what's acceptable to the elite of this hobby into a checklist. I
you
think that is
can it's so
oversimplifying it.
it's so tough with a hobby like this too, right? Because like you can teach people like what to look for per se, but you can't teach them to care more about the product.
Yeah,
And
it has to be someone who
Yes,
cares. They
yeah,
have to have
that's
that
where you're
innate
going to get your
caring for
true
it.
QC is with people
I
that
totally
actually
agree.
give a
Yeah.
damn.
You can absolutely outsource the simple things like counting switches because that's just physically counting a number of switches and putting them in a bag or a box or whatever else the medium might be. That you can do. Quality control, however, you can't. Like they have to really care about what they're doing to be able to make a difference and make the right judgment calls. Like what I would find acceptable on a board, I would like to think would most of the community would find acceptable. What I find unacceptable, 99% of the other people out there in the world would find acceptable. It still would be within their realms of acceptability for the price point they've paid. And I think we just need to be really, really careful with that as vendors.
Yeah, yeah. Iwane, thank you so much for the sub, man. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Owen. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good question though. He also follows up and says later on, personally, I'm going to just try different manufacturers. GMK won't miss me, but I'm happy to try other manufacturers. Yeah, I mean,
Awesome, man. Yeah,
competition.
go for it.
Yeah, competition among manufacturers only really benefits the consumers too. I'd love to see another like true GMK competitor arrive on the scene. I know obviously we have JTK doing double shot ABS. They've kind of struggled to really kind of get their foot out there and compete at the same level. I would argue, at least. And then obviously you have other things like Enjoy PBT that's kind of breaking into the double shot ABS world. Still not really close to the same level of quality as GMK.
Yep.
It'd be nice to have some real competition because I feel like we get that a little bit more with PBT, but not quite as much with double shot ABS. Um,
Yeah,
it,
I agree. Yeah,
Can I just
PBT has a
be
lot more scope.
can I
Go for
just
it.
be
Yeah,
the devil's advocate here?
always.
of course
Is
you
it
can.
that these companies cannot really also another point of view, but couldn't it be that these companies are really not making it because we don't allow them to? Because we keep
How
being
do
the
you mean?
one saying GMK is GMK. Look at this, look at their legends. They're amazing, although some of them we know.
Not
But
always perfect.
look at their quality. Look at again going back to
Okay.
what Curious Yellow said. Nowadays, having QC issues, especially with space bars on ABS, which sometimes is unthinkable, but it happens. Couldn't it be that also a lot of these companies like JTK, etc., are not really doing more because we as again I hate this word, but the elitism, but thinking no, JMK is JMK, and these
Yeah, we've
guys
put GMK on a pedestal, and we've said that's
we've
the
put
that's the
them in
level
a
everything
pedestal
has to
and we
meet.
don't
Yeah,
accept others that might yes they might need to be a bit more developed eventually, but that you know in the end are not that really that different, what I mean, in terms of quality.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's just my idea, right?
Yeah. No,
Because
absolutely
it's now
true. Because
because it's fun. It's you're part of the cool kids because you're using GMK and you're not using
it's
JTK.
it's
As an
trendy.
example,
Yeah.
right? It's trendy. It's what you need to use, right? Maybe.
sure. It's an interesting one, yeah, and I think trying other manufacturers and working with other manufacturers is absolutely key. And if you look over the last 3 or 4 years, we have seen a rise in more manufacturers. So instead of just having Cherry and SA, which was pretty much all that was out there when I jumped, we've now got XDA and DSA and MG and
The
Cat
list
and
goes on
Cam and
forever.
there's so many different profiles from so many different manufacturers. So I think the competition is becoming there. As you said, Brian, I think the PBT space is more easily accessible to more manufacturers purely because the processes tend to be cheaper than double shotting. Dye-sub is inherently cheaper as a process to set up and create tooling for than double shotting ABS is. So it's I think it's a matter of time. And we just need to wait for it and go through. And don't be scared to try new manufacturers. You know, we've got Geekark that's recently started making keycaps as well in more and more group buys. And just have to try them out. Just have
Yeah.
to keep trying them.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick shout out to IP9932 who subbed earlier and I missed it. Thank you so much for the sub, man.
Oh,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you, man. Thank you, IP. Yeah.
Yeah, he also says I love me some DCS. Oh man, same.
DCS is amazing.
Underrated.
Yeah.
This yes will come back. Will be something that people will start, especially if the time, the lead times are very short. People will get them.
Yeah.
Although, again, then comes back to our elitist idea of no, it's not. They're very thin, or it's
I
always
hate that
well,
argument. I hate that
yeah,
argument.
it's
It
DCS is
doesn't even
thin,
make
therefore it's
sense.
bad.
Yeah,
No,
it's like not even
DCS
a
is
real
great.
argument.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's
yeah.
like a fantastic profile. It's nice. It's lovely to type on.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ah,
yeah.
any-
Okay.
There
yeah.
could be options, and again, me before when I started, for me, I wouldn't see that much of a difference between cherry profile and OEM profile. Nowadays, I can feel, because I've got so used to cherry profile, that now I can feel. But when you're starting out, and if you're using an OEM and then someone gives you a cherry profile and you type on it, and after a week you move to the OEM, you won't feel that much of a difference. So, I think, yes, obviously you get used to the preferred profile that you use, and some people love SA. I haven't used SA myself, but I don't think that I would get used to it because I find them too high. Some people just love it, but would we just be too used to the cherry size profile that because even on JTK they're a bit higher, maybe half a millimeter, I don't know, but I find them a bit higher than the regular cherry profile from GMK. So
Yeah. Well, I
let's
think
see. Yeah,
that's probably as good a time as any to wrap up this
indeed.
stream. We got a little long, but that's okay. I thought the discussion was pretty good, and obviously any
Yeah,
more
because we came to zero conclusions as well, which was
Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah,
the discussion could
we
be
spent
good,
all
but the
this
results.
time and we found nothing. That's
Yeah. Well,
basically
I think
the cool
we
thing
all
about.
got to both look and listen to your sexy voice, Vogon, and I think that's really as good an excuse as any to tune into today's episode. So
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you. I really
100%. Yeah.
appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah. So any closing thoughts today? Obviously, we talked a little bit about our closing thoughts for customs, but just in general, any closing thoughts before we head out, gentlemen?
Vogan, this is your chance to shill as well. I've been dropping your podcast in
Oh,
chat all
okay.
afternoon,
No,
but yeah, this is your chance to shill as well.
no,
Shill.
I don't really want to shield that much, but yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for the people that listen to me already. I really appreciate that. Again, makes my day. If you guys don't know, I do a podcast called The Talk where I interview people in the hobby. I try to also play a bit of devil advocates on certain things, and I have my own personal ideas on a lot of things. So, you know, if you guys listen to me, and if you would do me a favor, drop me a review or suggest the podcast to someone that has not listened to it. That would also help a lot. If you don't, I would appreciate a listen. If you don't like it, that's perfectly okay. But that's it. And I would like to thank these two fine gentlemen for having me today. Really enjoyed being here.
The honor
and,
is ours, Vogon.
It really
and
is.
I guess we won't know what a custom is eventually, but it was a really, really interesting talk. I
Maybe
really
maybe we'll
enjoyed
do a
to be here.
follow up when.
I feel like we could have argued about it all night as well. We could have had like a 6-hour stream where we just argue about
Exactly.
what is a custom and not. Yeah.
I'm glad that we came to two or even three potentially different conclusions to it as well, which I think
Yeah.
makes it way more
Yeah.
interesting than if we had just all agreed on the same thing.
The ironic thing is, right, this is what I did learn. The ironic thing is that all of us don't really have the same sense or agree on what the definition of a custom isn't. But yet at the same time, we all agree on what is and isn't a custom board. That was the kicker for me. All three of us have different opinions on how we get to that, but all of us agree on what is and isn't a custom board. It's kind of interesting. Hey,
Well,
Yeah,
sometimes
indeed.
Sometimes it just goes that way. Anyway, to all of you out in chat, thank you so much for watching today. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you had a good time. Stick around. We're going to go ahead and raid another channel, and hopefully go say something wholesome to them as well. But anyways, Vogon, thank you once again for joining us. We very much appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure to be here. Really, really has been. Thank you so much.
Heck yeah. So everyone in chat, make sure you go follow the Thok, linked there in the Twitch chat as well. You can go check out Vogon's other content. It's good stuff. I highly, highly recommend it. Especially the episodes that have featured myself and or Jay.
I'm not sure that you want to listen to mine.
I thought it was lovely.
Yeah.
I really did.
It was very good.
It's good.
If I can say so myself, was
we're not biased at all. We like ourselves.
No, I'm not chilling. I'm not really passing any wax on anyone. But yeah, if you guys want to listen to Brian and Jay. They were amazing episodes, and you should listen to those because these guys are amazing.
Thank you.
Well, it's true. It was a really two episodes I really enjoyed recording. So thank you so much.
All right, guys. Who are we rating? I'm thinking Keep Noob.
I was going to suggest Milk Teethed, but yeah, we can do Keep Noob.
We'll do Keep Noob. It was her birthday yesterday, so we'll.
Okay. Let's do Keep Noob.
Yeah, we'll go say even though we're a day late, we'll go say happy birthday and or
yeah. Let's raid Keep Noob and wish her a happy birthday. Yeah.
Yeah. Heck yeah. All right, guys, stick around for this raid that we'll be going to in just a moment. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and yeah, have a good time tonight, and let's go say something wholesome over at Keep Noob stream.
You guys have a good one.
Thanks, guys. See ya.